An elderly Hispanic man named Miguel Valdez sits in the sleepy village of Thunder Basin, Wyoming, where the wind whispers Old West mysteries through worn wooden houses. At Linda's diner, his hands shake when he drinks his morning coffee, hands that most people would consider to be just another symptom of aging. However, the secret in those trembling palms is poised to rock this tiny community to its foundation. You see, 30 years ago, those identical hands were regarded as the steadiest in the West, spanning 7 territories. Miguel Valdez was a legendary figure in those days, not merely a skilled shooter. Not because he had killed a lot of guys, but because he had saved a lot of lives with shooting so accurate that it seemed impossible. They dubbed him Dead Eye Valdez, the man who could disarm 5 men before they could clear leather and shoot a playing card edge-on at a distance of 100 yards. But that was before he vanished, opting to live a quiet life in this desolate region of Wyoming, abandoning his notoriety and legacy. He sat in that same corner table for 5 years, letting his coffee drip from his shaking hands as the villagers told him wild tales about the great marksman who was just in their neighborhood. The day the Iron Raiders rode into town, everything changed. Tell us where you're tuning in from before we resume. Make sure to subscribe if this tale resonates with you, as I have something really special in store for you tomorrow. The Lindy's Diner's windows let in the morning sun. As he wraps his shabby hands around a coffee cup, Miguel Valdez sits in the booth in the corner. He is now seldom seen by the regulars at Lindy's. Despite his best efforts to be careful, his trembling hands continue to spill coffee as he sits at the same corner booth every morning for the past 5 years. They only see what he wants them to see, another elderly man enjoying his peaceful retirement in a place that has long since passed. With a coffee pot in hand and her eyes focusing on every detail, Emily Brooks walks between the tables with the elegance of someone who has done it for 20 years. She observes how Miguel's trembling hands fully settle when he believes no one is looking, and how his gaze still tracks movement with astonishing clarity. However, she never brings it up, any more than she does the old, yellowed newspaper clippings she discovered in the diner's storage closet that depict a younger Miguel Valdez accepting marksmanship awards. "Mr. Valdez, more coffee?" The warmth of sincere devotion is evident in Emily's voice. Seeing those hands shake more every year since he came to Thunder Basin, she has been preparing his breakfast every morning. "Emily, thank you." He has the mellow rasp of age in his voice. "How's school going for little Ethan?" With a backpack draped over one shoulder, Emily's 12-year-old kid storms through the entrance of the diner before she can respond. "Did you see the sunrise this morning, Mr. Valdez?" The clouds, all stretched out like rifle smoke, appeared exactly as you had predicted. A grin creases Miguel's wrinkled cheeks. "I see you've been honing your observational skills. Son, pull up a chair. Emily, your mother won't mind if you arrive at school a few minutes late, would she?" Emily feigns contemplation, but her smile betrays her true feelings. "Ethan, you have 5 minutes before heading directly to class." With curious eyes, the boy slips into the booth. "Mr. Valdez, tell me more about reading the clouds. How did you find out about weather signs?" Miguel responds, the same way you learn anything worthwhile, as his shaking hand manages to lift the coffee cup without dropping a drop. "Years of listening. You pick things up quickly when reading signs is your life's work." Leaning forward, Ethan detects the beginning of a story. "Mr. Valdez, when did reading clouds become your life?" The elderly man's gaze wanders to the window, concentrating on something distant from the dusty streets of Thunder Basin. "Son, that's a tale for another time. However, you may practice this today. Have you noticed the birds' unusually low flight? Why are they congregating on the power lines rather than the trees?" Ethan gives an enthusiastic nod. Indicates a decrease in air pressure. There will likely be a storm by nightfall. According to those Mares high tales, it's a big one as well. The morning silence is broken by the thunder of motorcycles, and the talk pauses. They see 3 bikers, their bikes shining with chrome and danger, drive up outside the diner through the window. A towering man with a painted hunter's head on his helmet, the lead rider, dismounts with a smooth elegance that conveys violence restrained. Miguel murmurs softly, "Ethan," with a fresh edge in his voice. School is about to start. Emily tightens her grip on the coffee pot and steps between the door and her kid. Hunter Storm Richards, accompanied by Kevin Thunder Andrews and Derek Chain Walker, pushes the door open as the bell above it dings. Patches sewed on their leather coats and a knight's helmet covered in storm clouds catch the dawn light. "Well, have a look at what we have." Hunter's voice exudes the haughtiness that results from never having encountered a real threat. "Isn't it lovely to have a regular family get-together?" Emily detects something odd, but Miguel's hands are still in his coffee cup. They no longer tremble at all. "There's enough space for everyone," Miguel replies gently. "In 3 counties, Emily's coffee is the greatest." The old man's voice lacks fear, and Hunter's eyes narrow. His boots are heavy on the linoleum floor as he approaches. "Old-timer, you're not interested in coffee. My boys and I are trying to find someone. He may have gone through these areas, I've heard." Valdez is the name of the former shooter. Linda Peterson is polishing a glass behind the counter when she freezes. She's been in Thunder Basin long enough to notice the abrupt change in the atmosphere, which is similar to the drop in air pressure before a tornado. Miguel responds, "Valdez is a common name, especially in these parts," without raising his head from his coffee. Chain leans on the counter and continues, "This one would have been different. We heard that he was really skilled with a gun. Won a number of prestigious events in the past. Contests?" There is real interest in Miguel's voice. He doesn't seem like the type of man the Iron Raiders would be interested in. The knife on Thunder's belt catches his twitching hand. "Old man, you seem to know a great deal about us." "Simply perceptive. Your patches have a lot to say." Established in '98. Territory that includes portions of Montana and the majority of Wyoming. Miguel stops and takes another drink of his coffee, something he is known for. Resolving issues for those unable to contact the legal system. The diner's temperature appears to drop by 10 degrees. Hunter advances one more step, casting his shadow over Miguel's table. "You can be a bit too perceptive for your own good." Emily tries to step in, but Miguel looks at her and shakes his head slightly. The tremor that has characterized his hands for the past 5 years has completely disappeared, and his hands are still stable on the coffee cup. Emily yells, "Ethan," in a strained voice. "Now for school." His gaze never leaves Miguel's booth as the lad grudgingly makes his way to the door. Even though he has known the elderly man all his life, something has changed. Miguel's posture exhibits a level of attention he has never observed before. A tense preparedness that makes him think of a mountain lion documentary he's seen. "The thing about being observant is that you learn to see what's coming before it arrives," Miguel adds, raising his head to finally meet Hunter's gaze. "Similar to that storm that is on our way. It's going to be awful. Before it hits, you might want to find shelter." There is no comedy in Hunter's laugh. "Old-timer, is that a threat?" "No, son." Beneath the soft tone of Miguel's voice is something ancient and terrible. Another forecast for the weather. Hunter Richards' leather jacket creaks as he moves about Miguel's booth like a predator evaluating its prey. The silver hunter's head pin on his collar catches the morning light coming through Linda's diner's windows, causing reflections to dance over the walls. Chain and Thunder splayed out behind him, instinctively assuming positions of fire. Miguel's unwavering stare is aware of this habit. "Do you know what I believe?" There's a confidence in Hunter's voice that comes from years of others giving up. "You seem to know exactly who we're trying to find. Perhaps even more familiar with him than most." Even though Miguel's coffee cup is now empty, his hands are still clasped around it. Their typical tremor was absent. Even the typical clamor of dishes from the kitchen has subsided as Linda and her cook struggle to hear what's happening in the diner. Miguel responds, "Tell you what," using the same soft tone he used when instructing Ethan about cloud patterns. "Why don't you guys take a seat? Eat some breakfast. The pancakes Emily makes are worth the time and effort." Thunder snorts. "Old dude, you think you're very funny?" "No, I believe I'm hungry, son. And it seems to me that you are only making these decent folks anxious over ancient tales and myths." The coffee cup rattles when Chain slams his hand on the table. "No, we're not inquiring about breakfast. According to rumors, Valdez was a talented trick shooter who won tournaments and gained notoriety before going missing 5 years ago." Emily approaches the area behind the counter where she stores the antique shotgun. Hunter notices her stir and his smile becomes rapacious. "It's easy there, sweetheart. I'm just chatting amiably with my grandfather here. Isn't that correct?" The door of the diner chimes before Emily can answer. Sheriff Frank Hawkins enters, his badge gleaming in the dawn light and his boots dirty. He observes the scenario with the skill of someone who has read trouble for 30 years. "Boys, isn't it a little early for social calls?" Hawkins speaks in a relaxed tone, but his hand is at ease close to his holster. Hunter slowly spins around, his eyes never seeing his smile. "Sheriff, I'm simply stopping by to inquire about an old friend." To require 3 Iron Raiders to inquire about him, he must be a friend. Hawkins advances farther inside the diner until he is in a position to view all 3 motorcycles. It's funny, though, because friends typically know where to find one another without drawing attention to themselves. Miguel silently observes the conversation, taking in every nuanced movement, including the way the left hand of the chain continues fluttering toward his jacket. How Thunder's position has changed to maintain sight of the door and Hawkins. The most telling is how Hunter's smile has become more irritated. Hunter continues, his voice sharpening, "There's no law against asking questions, especially about a man who might have some answers we need." Hawkins concurs that as long as the asking is amicable, there is no rule barring it. He looks across to Miguel. "Mr. Valdez, are you all right here? These young lads were going to order breakfast or go on." "All right, Sheriff." "Were you guys not?" Miguel's tone of dismissal causes Hunter's face to deepen. His face is near Miguel's as he leans in and rests both hands on the table. "Do you know what I believe? I believe that a man who spends his time drinking coffee and watching clouds, with his hands shaking too much to hold the cup in his hand, is either exactly who we're seeking for or knows where to look." Miguel whispers, "Be careful, son. You're wasting my coffee." Hunter casts a downward glance. He somehow knocked over the empty cup while leaning in. His jacket slides back a little as he straightens, exposing the revolver holstered beneath his arm. Miguel remarks, "That's a nice piece," pointing to the weapon. Colt Python, 3-inch barrel, nickel-plated, personalized grips, unique design. Better for concealment, but more difficult to manage than the typical 6-inch. Usually, a man with a gun like that has something to prove. The diner's temperature appears to plummet. Hawkins' voice breaks the tension as Hunter's hand flutters toward his jacket. "That's enough. If you guys wish to remain in town, that's great, but this discussion is ended." Thunder advances a step. "When did the Iron Raiders get orders from a small-town sheriff? In my town, they began to bother elderly guys before breakfast." Hawkins' voice exudes the confidence that comes with taking on more formidable foes than 3 motorcycle riders. "You can either go out or sit down and place your order. You're done troubling Mr. Valdez, anyway." Hunter slowly straightens himself, his gaze fixed on Miguel's face. "Yes, Sheriff, we're finished. For the time being." He covers the rifle with his jacket. "However, we will be present. In a town like this, people will inevitably cross paths again." Hunter stops as the 3 bikers approach the door. "What's humorous, do you? We're seeking for a man who could cut a playing card in half with a shot from 50 yards out. In a place like this, how likely is it that you will discover someone like that?" "I'd think it's fairly lengthy." Miguel gives a tactful response. "Odds are funny things, of course. Consider the impending storm. It's likely to strike at sunset. However, storms can sometimes come early and take people off guard." The implication of the warning makes Hunter's jaw tighten. He leads his soldiers out without saying another word. The tension in the diner lingers like smoke even as the noise of motorcycles fades into the distance. Opposite Miguel, Hawkins slides into the booth. "Do you want to explain the true nature of that?" As he reaches for the dropped coffee cup, Miguel's hands resume their usual shaking and he remarks, "Just some young men confusing stories with reality. Frank, you don't need to worry. 3 Iron Raiders don't just appear and start asking questions. If there's difficulty ahead, Miguel, it will always come. What kind and how to meet it is the sheriff's question." Miguel watches the accumulating clouds outside the window, which resemble the impending storm. "Being ready is the best we can do." Emily comes over with a fresh cup of coffee, her face worried but her hands steady. From the outside, Ethan could see everything. "Mr. Valdez, he is concerned about you." Miguel's face becomes softer. "Let him know I'm all okay, but perhaps keep him nearby for a few days. It's not just us that storms tend to kick up." A blast of wind carries the promise of thunder and rattles the diner's windows as if to accentuate his comments. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining. It is really important to us. Let's return to the narrative. Ethan Brooks sits on the back steps of the diner, watching Miguel Valdez go through a box of old tools as the late afternoon shadows spread across Thunder Basin's main street. As he raises each item, the elderly man's hands tremble, but Ethan detects something strange. For those few seconds, the trembling disappears whenever Miguel checks a weight or tries an edge. With one eye on the street via the window, Emily cleans tables inside the diner. All day, the Iron Raiders' motorcycles have been seen circling the town, their motors resonating like distant thunder off buildings. At Miguel's typical booth, she stops and fingers a tiny groove on the edge of the table. Before Hunter leaned on it this morning, there was no such groove. "You were concerned about him?" With a stack of menus behind Emily, Linda asks. Emily responds, "Not about him," while continuing to gaze at the groove. "About the future. Observe the way those folks gazed at him." Ethan's voice echoes through the open door outside. "I have a question for you, Mr. Valdez." Miguel puts down the wrench that he has been studying. "Son, you just did, but ask someone else." Ethan pauses, picking his words carefully, "When those bikers were here this morning, I noticed your hand cease shaking. You could tell everything about that man's pistol just by looking at the way you spoke about it." Miguel's eyes sharpen somewhat, but his worn face stays impassive. "Ethan, observation is a useful talent. Tried to impart such knowledge to you. But isn't it more than that? Old newspapers are stored in a box beneath Mom's bed. There was one about a shooting competition from years ago. The man in the photo." The roar of motorcycles cuts Ethan off before he can say anything more. Slowly, 3 bikes pass the back alley of the diner. With his face turned to the diner, Chain rides point. The third rider isn't Hunter, but Thunder comes next. It's a newcomer, sporting a patch designating him as an enforcer from the mother chapter of the Iron Raiders. Miguel watches them go by, his hands fully steady. "Come on in, Ethan. However, tell your mother to give Sheriff Hawkins a call, son. Inform him that family has been summoned in by our guests." Miguel retrieves a big wrench from the toolbox as Ethan reluctantly makes his way inside. He throws it at a pile of empty cans 30 feet distant without appearing to aim. The wrench spins flawlessly, clattering to the ground after successively knocking each can. His hands instantly start to shake again. Customers have noticed the motorcycles circling like vultures, and the cafe has become quiet inside. Before Emily can go to the rear door to lock it, Miguel walks in. Sheriff Hawkins, who is already there and is observing through the blinds, claims that they are receiving some unwanted attention outside. Marcus Red Keller, the enforcer for the Iron Raiders, is that new rider. He only appears when trouble is about to break out. From behind the counter, Linda adds, "There's already trouble. Miguel, I saw them asking inquiries about you at the gas station earlier. About your daily schedule and residence." Miguel takes a seat in his booth and grips a coffee cup with shaking hands. "Let's say they weren't pleased with my morning weather prediction." "This isn't a joke," comments Emily sternly. "These are dangerous men." When the Iron Raiders moved into Rollins last year, everyone was aware of what transpired. "Everyone knows a story," Miguel says softly. "Usually, the truth is different." Speaking up is Ethan, who has been feigning to do his schoolwork at the counter. "Mr. Valdez, is it accurate to say that you participated in shooting contests similar to those reported in the newspaper?" There is silence in the diner. Miguel looks away as he takes a large gulp of coffee. "Son, it was a long time ago. A different kind of living. However, didn't you win? You never missed, according to the paper. Claimed that you could." Emily cuts you off, "Ethan. Enough questions." Miguel, however, stops her with a raised hand. "No worries, the boy has the right to inquire." He looks across at Ethan. "I did compete, yes. I did win a few events, yes. However, that isn't the story's most significant aspect." "What is it?" Ethan forgets his schoolwork and lunges forward. "The reason I stopped is what matters." Even Sheriff Hawkins is drawn to Miguel's voice because of its weight. "As you can see, being proficient at something is not the same as using it wisely. It took me a while to figure it out." The motorcycles go by outside once more, their engines roaring like ravenous monsters. This time, Red Keller slows as he passes the front window of the diner and rides point. Hawkins whispers, "They're not going to let this go. They are prepared to use powerful individuals to obtain anything they desire." Miguel responds, "They want a phantom," in a remarkably composed tone. They heard a story about a man who used a rifle to accomplish unimaginable feats. The issue is that phantoms don't always sleep soundly. Emily takes a protective stance toward Ethan. "Miguel, what are you say?" ing. Stating that perhaps it's time for certain things to cease trembling. Everyone watches as he puts down his coffee cup. He has very stable hands. The sheriff may wish to temporarily clear the street. An early storm is on its way. Thunder rumbles across the far mountains as though in reaction. It's not thunder, however, that makes everyone uneasy. More motorcycles are roaring their way into town. A lot more. Ethan murmurs softly, "Mom." Mr. Valdez no longer shakes his hands. For the first time, Emily sees behind Miguel's shaky hands and kind manner as she gives him a serious look. She notices something terrible lurking in plain sight, just as Hunter Richards must have sensed this morning. She begins, "Miguel," but he interrupts with a kind grin. "Ethan and you should go home, Emily. Go the opposite route. Perhaps Linda should close early today." He looks over at Hawkins. "Your deputy is eager for some excitement, Frank." The sheriff's belt is straightened. Anyway, the town has been silent for far too long. Miguel stands slowly as the sound of motorcyclists approaching gets stronger. Now he moves differently. Not a trace of aging or tremor, smooth and precise. He turns to face Ethan, who glances back at him with a mix of wonder and doubt. "Son, do you recall what I said about observation? About viewing not what you expect to see but what is actually there?" Ethan gives a nod. The shadows aren't always the ideal location to hide something. It is in the open, and nobody is paying attention to what is in the light because they are too busy searching for shadows. The thunder is rolling closer now. Ethan knows he's going to find out why those newspapers his mother collected discussed Miguel Valdez with such fear and reverence as the storm approaches and he sees her lock up the cafe. More thunder evenings ride into town, their chrome flashing under storm clouds, and the sky grows darker in the late afternoon. Every time a bike goes by, Red Keller counts while standing in the street. 16, 17, 15. His eyes never leave the diner's front window, where Miguel Valdez was last seen, but his scarred face remains emotionless. Frank Hawkins checks his ammunition inside the sheriff's office as he speaks to his 3 officers. Get the store owners to lock up so that everyone is off the streets. Now is the time for everyone who doesn't have to be in town to go home. They see Red Keller raise his hand through the window. The motorcycle's simultaneous engine cuts created a spooky quiet that was only shattered by distant thunder. Do you truly believe the elderly man is worth all of this? Deputy Wilson asks, his forehead dripping with nervous perspiration. Hawkins moved in a chamber. It's not about value. The goal is to keep our town safe from terror. Emily rushes Ethan to the back door at Linda's diner, but the boy fights. Hold on, Mom, take a look at Mr. Valdez. Miguel's posture has entirely changed as he stands by the front window. The tremble in his hands and the stoop of age are gone. He unbuttons his faded denim jacket with a smooth ease, exposing a weathered leather holster that appears to be as much a part of him as his own skin. Miguel's voice is firm yet quiet, Emily. Take Ethan along the back alley to his house. Avoid the main street. Miguel. With a soft smile, he interrupts Emily before she can finish. It's okay. I've been anticipating something similar. Too lengthy, perhaps. He looks across at Ethan. I mentioned reading signals, don't you remember? Well, sometimes you can read the signs back. Red Keller's voice echoes outside in the increasing wind. Let's discuss Shadow Creek, Valdez. Miguel narrows his gaze a little. They see Hunter Richards, visibly upset, walk toward Red through the window. The plan was not to do that. We were expected to. Plans are subject to change. He is interrupted by Red. This dude stole stuff from me at Shadow Creek 15 years ago. Accounts need to be balanced. Ethan murmurs, still reluctant to go. What is Shadow Creek? An error. Miguel responds quietly. I believed I had buried it. He looks at Emily. Bring him home. Right now. However, 3 more bikers roar up before Emily can move. They are not like the other cyclists. The rain and sun have faded the older patches that these men wear. One of them dismounts and approaches Red, his face severely damaged. Behind the counter, Linda murmurs, that's Iron Reed. He was at Shadow Creek, they claim. Assume that he is the sole person who. Miguel interrupts, story. People adore their tales. However, he flexes his hands once, a move that is more about readiness than age. Iron Reed stops next to Red Keller as thunder roars closer. After exchanging pleasantries, the 2 men turn to face the diner. With his body language displaying increasing hesitancy, Hunter Richards stands a little apart. Sheriff Hawkins enters in the back and says, Miguel, from the doorway. We can do whatever this is about. This was always going to happen, Frank. There are some storms you can't avoid. Miguel's voice is heavy with experience and wisdom. However, you can get ready for them. Iron Reed pulls out his revolver out of nowhere, pointing it straight up rather than toward the diner. All but Miguel recoil as the shot pierces the atmosphere. Reed's voice blasts across the street, Valdez. Recall your statement from that day regarding a man's character and weapon handling. Another round is chambered by him. I've had 15 years to reflect on justice, character, and what you took away from us. Emily clutches Miguel's arm as he approaches the door. You are unable to go outside. They're too numerous. Miguel responds cryptically, in this type of weather, numbers don't really matter. His eyes soften as he turns to face Ethan. You wanted to know why I stopped shooting competitions, son. Why did I decide for a tranquil life? He points to the group of motorcycle riders. Because someone will always assume that you owe them something because you are skilled with a weapon. There is always someone who wants to compete with a legend. But you're capable of defeating them? Like in the headlines, Ethan's speech exudes total faith. Son, winning isn't always the solution. Sometimes deciding not to fight is the true win. Miguel puts his jacket right. But sometimes it's not an option to choose not to fight. Dust devils dance across the roadway as the wind outside gets stronger. Iron Reed and Red Keller wait like shadowy statues. With expressions ranging from apprehensive apprehension to eager eagerness, the assembled Iron Raiders form a wall of leather and chrome behind them. Hunter Richard abruptly moves ahead. We didn't come here for Red. The elderly man is worthless. Stop talking, puppy, Red growls. You have no idea how much he cost us or how much he is worth. With practiced ease, Miguel's hand slides to his holster to check it. Bring these folks to the back room, Frank. Last chance, Emily. Go, take Ethan. Ethan murmurs, Mom. He no longer has any shaking in his hands. Miguel Valdez does indeed remain still, rolling his shoulders with fluid motions. Even Sheriff Hawkins straightens as he speaks again because of the authority in his voice. Do you want to discuss Shadow Creek, Red, Iron? All right, but only us. Take your audience home. The chuckle of Red echoes in the wind. Old dude, no audience this time. Just us and 15 years of waiting, with no judges or competition rules. Lightning shatters the sky, as if to punctuate his words, and thunder roars in its wake. The time has come for legends to either die or resurrect, and the storm has arrived. Miguel takes deliberate, measured strides toward the door. Ethan, do you recall my observational statement? Now pay close attention. You're going to discover why certain stories endure even when their creators would prefer they didn't. Miguel Valdez enters the diner's porch as the sky in Thunder Basin grows darker and flashes with lightning. His jacket is whipped by the wind, exposing a battered leather holster underneath. Red Keller and Iron Reed, whose faces are harsh from waiting for 15 years, stand 20 yards out like dark pillars against the encroaching rain. With their bikes shining dully in the stormlight, the gathering Iron Raiders form a rough semicircle. Hunter Richard stands a little distance away, his face displaying increasing worry as he observes Red's barely controlled fury. Despite the wind, Miguel's voice is audible before this continues. You should be aware of one thing regarding Shadow Creek. We are sufficiently informed. Near his gun, Red's hand twitches. You took the guns away from us, damaged our reputation, and made us appear foolish in front of everyone. Miguel's response is gentle yet incisive. Ruined your reputation. Do you believe that to be the case? He looks around at the group of bikers. Red, how many of these boys are aware of the truth? Regarding the reason I was there? With his damaged face contorted, Iron takes a step forward. Old dude, stop talking. You are no longer allowed to make up stories. Miguel, however, goes on, his voice as calm as his hands. Along that section of the route, 3 ladies had gone missing. Although local law enforcement was unable to provide any proof, everyone knew who was at fault. My cover was the competition. Emily tries to pull Ethan away, but he presses against the diner window behind him. The child is mesmerized as he sees his kind pal changed before his very eyes. Red's face grows gloomy. You were a hired gun who entered the room posing as a fierce rival while actually working for the federal government. No. Miguel makes a sharp correction. I worked for the families of those girls. I just have a legitimate way to demonstrate my gun skills thanks to the competition. What you had done. Another burst of lightning, closer this time. Emily notices Miguel's hands close to his holster in that perfect moment, poised like a coiled spring and steady as stone. Red, you know what's funny? Miguel moves forward one step at a time. After losing a shooting competition, you're still upset. Not about the 3 girls that Iron and you assisted in their disappearance. I can infer everything I need to know about your personality from that. Hunter Richards turns his head and looks at Iron and Red. Other Iron Raiders move uncomfortably, some looking at each other doubtfully. Iron yells, he's lying, yet there's a hint of dread in his voice. Retaliation is at issue here. Concerning. Miguel interrupts to talk about justice. The same as it was back then. The one distinction is that I wore a badge in those days. Right now. There is no warmth in his smile. I have no norms to follow and nothing to prove now. Miguel's movements blur even more quickly than the lightning-fast flow of Red. Almost simultaneously, 2 shots crack. As Miguel's revolver spins into the air after hitting the hammer precisely, Red's bullet kicks up dirt close to his feet. Miguel's voice stops Iron from reaching for his own firearm. Boys, that was a warning. The next shot won't be as cordial. Someone in the crowd murmurs, it's impossible. Nowadays, nobody is so quick. Ethan has gotten past his mother and is speaking from the doorway of the diner. When he is shooting, his hands do not tremble at all. Come on in, Ethan. Despite Emily's obvious concern, Miguel lifts his free hand a little. Emily, let him observe. The boy must understand the distinction between possessing power and deciding how to utilize it. With a mask of rage on his face, Red slowly recovers his gun. Do you believe that this makes a difference? Miguel calmly responds, numbers don't matter much, old man. We've got you surrounded when you are in a position where you have the upper hand. Have you noticed that the sun is now behind me? How is the glare causing you to become half-blind? How do your bikes obstruct your own paths of escape? Suddenly conscious of their tactical vulnerability, several Iron Raiders scan their surroundings. Hunter Richard takes a step back, separating himself from the Red. More crucially, though, Miguel adds in a voice that is obviously authoritative. You guys ought to ask yourselves a question. What else can I do if I can shoot a rifle at 20 paces out of a man's hand? And why do I not want to? Like impending storm clouds, the weight of that question descends upon the assembled riders. Some silently mount their bikes and turn on their motors. Red snarls, this ain't over, but his voice trembles, indicating hesitation. Actually, it was more than 15 years ago, Miguel adds quietly. You simply were unaware of it. Once more, his hands move with unfathomable speed, and Iron's pistol belt drops to the floor. The buckle smashed right through. There won't be a third warning after those 2. With his deputies dispersed behind him, Sheriff Hawkins exits the eatery. He declares that he believes it is time for everyone to make a decision. Either spend the night in my cell while we investigate some old Shadow Creek missing persons cases, or leave town quietly. The first heavy raindrops fall, as thunder roars overhead. Miguel Valdez remains steadfast in the encroaching darkness, his posture like to that of a man half his age, his presence seemingly filling the street. Hunter Richards mounts his bike and makes his choice first. Other people come after them until just Red and Iron are left, their features contorted with suppressed anger and growing terror. Red says, "We're not done," as he backs up to his motorcycle. "No," Miguel says in a low voice, "but you're out of my town. Red, bring your spirits back to Shadow Creek. This time, bury them properly." Ethan escapes Emily's hold and rushes to Miguel's side as the Iron Raiders thunder out into the encroaching storm. That was incredible. How did you do that? Later, son, Miguel interrupts softly, holstering his firearm while his hands start to shake once more. That was only the initial wind blast, actual thunder is still on the horizon. With a look of astonishment, horror, and comprehension on her face, Emily joins them. The shaking in your palms? Was it merely a show? All these years? Miguel gives her a dejected face. Sometimes it's best to hide in plain sight, and other times, appearing innocuous to others is the most considerate thing you can do. He looks across at Ethan. I mentioned reading signals, don't you remember? You just witnessed what occurs when people fail to notice the crucial ones. The deserted street is illuminated by another bolt of lightning, but everyone knows that this is only the beginning as Sheriff Hawkins gets closer. After a single encounter, Red and Iron didn't give up because they had been seeking retribution for 15 years. As Miguel mentioned, this was only the first wind gust, and the storm is on its way. Thunder rolls across Thunder Basin as rain pounds against the windows of Linda's cafe. Inside, Miguel Valdez sits at his typical booth, field stripping and cleaning his revolver with practiced accuracy while his hands remain steady. In contrast to the trembling-handed old man the town believed they knew, the weapon's blued steel gleams in the diner's lights, its worn grip conveying stories of years of use. Emily lingers close by, her gaze vacillating between wonder and worry, while Ethan sits across from him, observing every movement with excitement. Watching his deputies guide the remaining inquisitive residents of the town home through the storm, Sheriff Hawkins stands at the window. Hawkins notes, those weren't competition modifications, and gestures to Miguel's firearm. It's a weapon of war. U.S. Standard Issue. Miguel agrees in a low voice that Marshall Special Operations was around 1990. When I retired, they stated I had earned it and let me keep it. With wide eyes, Ethan leans forward. In the movies, you were a marshal. It's nothing like the movies, son. Miguel's hands glide over the components of the weapon. Instead of inciting violence, real law enforcement works to avoid it. About interpreting the circumstances of others. Knowing when to take action and when to wait. Emily places a fresh cup of coffee on the table while keeping her hand close to Miguel's shoulder. The way you've been here. People who read. Are you reading us? Miguel acknowledges that he was somewhat trying to live a quiet life. Ott should have been more aware. No matter how well you hide, the past will always find you. Despite the early hour, Linda flips the sign to closed and locks the front door of the diner. The storm outside gets worse, with sheets of rain turning the street into rivers. Sheriff Hawkins turns away from the window and says, those men. Iron and Red. They're not merely upset about a previous rivalry. In reality, what took place at Shadow Creek? Miguel skillfully puts his handgun back together, making sure that every component fits precisely. There was chaos in Shadow Creek. Along the roadway, 3 girls had disappeared. There were tales about a bunch of bikers who had been spotted in the vicinity, but the local police were either baffled or claimed to be the Raiders of Thunder. Ethan queries. They referred to themselves as the Highway Kings at the time. Red and Iron were employed by a man named Marcus Kane as enforcers. They believed that they could not be touched. Miguel's gaze grows aloof. I was recruited by those girls' families to do an informal investigation. I had cover to approach close thanks to the shooting competition. Despite her reservations, Emily settles down next to Ethan and becomes engrossed in the narrative. What did you discover? There was sufficient evidence to support a case, but Kane had connections and high-ranking acquaintances. Something more tangible was what we needed. Something that is visible to the public. Miguel checks the action of the handgun by rotating its cylinder. That opportunity came from the competition. Kane's best shots were Iron and Red. They had previously used their talent to win contests and enhance the gang's notoriety. So I went in. And defeat them, Ethan adds confidently. No, son. I made them public. I matched each shot they fired during the competition, then showed how certain scratches on their bullets matched evidence found at the crime scenes. Did it in front of 3 states' worth of law enforcement, media, and witnesses. Miguel's voice is filled with old sorrow rather than pride. Kane fell. And most of his group. However, amid the confusion, Red and Iron disappeared. Slowly, Sheriff Hawkins nods. And now they're back, accompanied by an entirely new generation of Iron Raiders. Not all of them, says Miguel. When the truth about Shadow Creek was revealed, did you observe Hunter Richards' reaction? What percentage of their younger riders left? Do you believe that's important? Emily queries. They're still too prevalent. Miguel responds that numbers aren't everything. Their local leader is Hunter. His uncertainty causes fissures. And guys like Iron and Red? They have no choice but to make those fissures wider. It's always their type. Ethan abruptly gestures through the window. Look. They spot a lone guy racing toward the diner through the storm. Nervously, Hunter Richards, minus his leather jacket, peered over his shoulder. Miguel says, "Go to the back room now." Everyone but Sheriff Hawkins moves at the sound of his commanding voice. "Keep an eye on the rear door, Frank. This might be a play, or it might be real." Emily stops at the door of the rear room. "Miguel. Take caution." He smiles softly at her. "I always am. I'm still here for that reason." Hunter arrives to the door of the diner and beats on it urgently. His terrified visage is visible through the rain-stained glass. The deeper terror of a guy whose world is falling apart, rather than the kind that arises from physical dangers. His voice echoes through the door, "Valdez. We must speak. Red has lost it. Everyone has been summoned in by him. The entire sea. Hapter. It's worse than that, though. He's made touch with another person. Someone from your history. Someone who has been waiting for a chance to meet you for 15 years. Those who knew Miguel as the shaky old-timer are nevertheless surprised by his fluid grace as he approaches the door. His gun hand is still at ease but prepared. Is that correct? Through the door, he calls. You're telling me this, but why? Since I recently learned the truth about what actually transpired with those girls at Shadow Creek. Hunter's tone falters. My sister. 2 years prior, she vanished on the same highway. We had no idea. I had no idea. Through the glass, Miguel examines Hunter's face and reads the sincere suffering there. At last, he gives Linda a signal, and she opens the door. Miguel's voice has a gentle authority as Hunter staggers in from the rain. Commence at the beginning. Tell me everything. Is Red bringing in anyone else? One thunderclap drowns out Hunter's response. However, as Miguel hears it, his face darkens. Suddenly, the storm outside appears insignificant in comparison to what Thunder Basin's future holds. Knowing that the boy is hearing from the back room, Ethan, Miguel yells. I mentioned reading signals, don't you remember? Now listen. Occasionally, the most significant indication is when the friends of your adversary begin to support you. Even though the rain is still falling, it now feels more like a prelude to the impending storm that will hit Thunder Basin than a natural storm. 15 years in the making, this storm is driven by justice, retaliation, and unspoken truths. With his hands encircling a cup of coffee that Linda silently brought, Hunter Richards sits at the diner counter, the rain still trickling off his garments. While the storm outside batters the windows, everyone within waits for him to continue, and the quiet is oppressive. At last, Hunter murmurs, his voice barely above a whisper, his name is Marcus Kane. After we departed this afternoon, Red gave him a call. Since Shadow Creek, Kane has been hiding and establishing a new group in the hopes of getting retribution. Miguel is standing near the window, alert but at ease. 3 years after Shadow Creek, Kane was said to have died in a fire in Mexico. Hunter responds that he wanted everyone to believe that it was simpler to work in the shadows. The Raiders of Thunder. His new network has us as just one chapter. He has teams working together throughout the Southwest, but they are kept apart enough that nobody can see the big picture. Now Sheriff Hawkins is arriving here after leaning forward. Red has called in Kane as well as him in every chapter within 500 miles. Hunter's grip on his cup tightens. Kane is bringing his personal team, the people who have supported him and been with him since before Shadow Creek. He falters, unable to complete. Silently, Miguel says, "Hide the bodies." The others who assisted him in making those girls vanish. Ethan observes his mentor's subtle change in attitude from the doorway of the back room, his eyes wide. Miguel's serenity has taken on a deadly quality that makes Ethan think of a documentary he once watched about mountain lions before they attack. "How many?" Miguel queries. Hunter responds, 30, maybe 40 Iron Raiders by morning. Kane's elite is coming another dozen. Now, they identify as the Phantom Riders, professional assassins masquerading as motorcyclists. Emily automatically takes a step toward Ethan, but her gaze never leaves Miguel. "You're telling us this, but why? What is the point of betraying your own people?" There is no comedy in Hunter's laugh. "My own people. I wanted to fit in and be a part of something powerful, so I joined the Iron Raiders. I've been assisting the men who may have killed my sister instead." He gives Miguel a look. "Back then, you attempted to stop them. Only you saw them for what they truly were." Despite his advanced age, Miguel walks away from the window in slow, deliberate steps. "And now? I now want to assist in permanently stopping them, but Kane is different from Red and Iron. He is astute and cautious. There will be plans inside plans for him." "Always did," says Miguel. "It took so long to catch him the first time because of this. He had to be allowed to get reckless and believe he was winning." With a motion that seems to grab everyone's attention, Sheriff Hawkins examines his revolver. "Miguel, town isn't prepared for this kind of battle. Although my deputies are decent individuals, are they up against professional murderers?" Miguel responds, "Then we switch the fight." He looks across at Hunter. There was always a weakness about Kane. His pride and his urge to show that he is the most intelligent person in the room. "Does he know you're here, tell me?" Hunter gives a headshake. In the chaos, they slipped away. Everyone is congregating to the former Miller Ranch outside of town because of Red. Kane isn't expected until the morning. Miguel gives Ethan a hesitant nod before doing something that causes him to gasp. His hands begin to shake as he begins to shake. He assumed the amiable demeanor that the community is so familiar with. "Excellent. That's how it should be. Return. Let them know I'm afraid. Inform them that today's shooting was a lucky break. That I'm simply an old man who got lucky and washed up." Hunter's expression changes to one of understanding. "Give them too much confidence. Made them sloppy," says Miguel. "While Red and Iron are careless, Kane is. They'll want to act quickly and establish their worth before Kane shows up. They will make mistakes at that point." Emily moves onward. "That's absurd. You're discussing battling an army." "No," Miguel murmurs. "Justice is what I'm discussing. Justice was served despite the 15-year delay." He gives Ethan a look. "Remember how I told you to read signs, son? Here's another lesson, then. Fighting a storm head-on isn't always the best course of action. There are moments when you have to lead it. Allow it to shatter against something more powerful than rain and wind." Ethan nods enthusiastically, but Emily is alarmed by something in Miguel's eyes. It was a sort of resigned determination rather than dread. The expression of a man who has been down this path before and is fully aware of its destination. Miguel turns to the sheriff, "Frank. Pick up the phone. Make a call to every trustworthy police officer within 100 miles. Don't reveal everything to them. Just that you might require assistance in handling some troublesome riders. They must be near us, but not too near." "And me?" Hunter stands up and asks. "Return. Do your share. But keep in mind, Kane is intelligent. He will be on the lookout for betrayals of this nature. Take caution. For the first time, Linda speaks up as Hunter approaches the door. What happened to those girls? Their families should be informed. Hunter stops, his hand resting on the door. There is a location in the mountains where Cain lives. An old mining claim. Once, when intoxicated, Red slipped about bodies in an ancient shaft. I didn't get his meaning until now. Miguel looks directly at Sheriff Hawkins. They exchange a wordless agreement. Justice involves more than merely averting impending harm. It's about taking responsibility for the past. Hunter turns around and adds, one more thing. Cain is bringing another person. For a chance at you, someone who has been practicing for 15 years. Because he researches his targets, they refer to him as the Mirror. Discovers how to shoot just like them. He studied your methods and approach for years. Everything that brought you fame. Miguel's eyes are as steely as steel, but his response is composed. Then, he has acquired incorrect lessons. Because my shooting style wasn't the only thing that made me dangerous. The question was why. Ethan takes Miguel's place as Hunter vanishes into the storm. Mr. Valdez, are you afraid? Son, it's sensible to be afraid. Keeps you focused and attentive. Miguel examines his rifle, his hand steadying once again. However, being afraid does not equate to being stopped. Keep it in mind. Outside, the storm is still raging, but it seems like only a prelude now. Marcus Cain, the Phantom Riders, and a reckoning that has been brewing for 15 years will all be present tomorrow. Something far more significant than a simple argument between bikers and an elderly man is about to take place in Thunder Basin. Justice, retribution, and the kind of mythology that will be discussed for decades to come are all about to take place there. Thunder Basin is changed at midnight. Even though it's still raining, shadows are now purposefully moving across the night. Sheriff Hawkins' deputies lead the town's population into back alleys and assist the elderly in moving into the church basement, which has been converted into a makeshift shelter. Others, under the silent direction of Miguel Valdez, carry medical kits, food, drink, and supplies. Miguel is seated at a table covered with local maps in Linda's diner, which has been transformed into a command center. The calm accuracy of a man who has before planned operations like this has taken the place of his shaking hands. He marks positions and tells that the Phantom Riders will take the high ground first. The tactical advantage has always appealed to Cain. They will want to use these buildings for fire positions and monitoring. The marks are examined by Sheriff Hawkins. With the deputies I have, we are unable to cover all of these topics. Miguel responds that we don't have to. We only have to convince them that we are. Do you still have those old mannequins in your storage room, Linda? Linda understands dawning and nods. 8 or so, from the Christmas show. Excellent. We'll occasionally shift them and place them in windows. Make them squander resources and time by having them watch shadows. On the map, Miguel's finger follows a path. Your deputies are free to navigate these service lanes in the meanwhile. And the ancient irrigation tunnels. Ethan, who has resisted Emily's pleas to go home, observes with interest. Mr. Valdez, you mean chess? Do you want them to see what you want them to? Yes, son. Perception turns into reality in a conflict like this. As Emily returns from assisting an elderly couple with their church accommodations, Miguel glances up. Any issues? No, but... She pauses. Some are discussing protecting their own properties. Not everyone desires to move away from home. Miguel stands up upright, his face solemn. They have the right to that. However, Cain's soldiers are unable to discriminate between civilians and fighters. They didn't. With rain dripping from his cap, a deputy storms in. 3 bikes were seen riding slowly down the north road, they appeared to be scouts. Miguel affirms that they are Phantom Riders. Cain never sends anyone other than his best. Mirror will accompany them as they examine the terrain and search for angles. He looks across at Ethan. I mentioned reading signals, don't you remember? Observe their movements. Professional killers exhibit tendencies and patterns that they are unaware of. They see 3 motorcycles vanishing through the rain through the windows of the diner. There is more shadow than substance among their riders. They shield each other's blind areas while moving with military accuracy. Miguel murmurs, the one in the middle. Mirror is that. Notice how, even when riding, he adopts the same shooting stance as me. He has been learning every information about me for years. Through the rain, Ethan narrows his eyes. However, why? Why imitate you? Because some men believe that mastering a method is equivalent to imitating it. Mirror wants to demonstrate that he is more adept than I am at being myself. There is a hint of melancholy in Miguel's voice. However, he has overlooked the most crucial lesson. It has never been about the shooting. Emily speaks softly as she approaches them. So what was it about? Option. Each time a trigger is pulled, a decision is made. Making the shot isn't the trick. It's in understanding your motivation. There is tension in the air even though the scouts vanish into the night. Everyone is aware that they will inform Kane that the true force will show up with the sunrise. After verifying his deputies' locations, Sheriff Hawkins comes back. The wife of Frank Wilson claims to have seen additional motorcycles traveling to the Miller Ranch. Many of them. Claims that they are congregating like vultures. Let them get together, Miguel says. In groups, they are easier to manage than dispersed. He looks at Linda. Do you still have those vintage railroad flares in your basement? Those from the time when the tracks were in use? Linda gives a nod. 24 or so. Spent years there. All right, we'll require them. The people of Kane are accustomed to working in the dark. When the time comes, let's eliminate that advantage. He gives Ethan a look. What was the first observational rule I taught you, son? Ethan proudly straightens. Individuals simply perceive what they anticipate. Well, we'll surprise them with something new. Something that will cause them to reevaluate all of their preconceived notions about this place. About me, when Emily looks at Miguel's face, she sees the cunning mind that made him famous rather than the kind old man who spilled coffee every morning. You've already done this. This is how a town was prepared. Once. Montana is a small state. The bad folks didn't have a good ending. His gaze wanders to the window. Kane, however, was present. He observed my efforts. Some of these tricks will be expected by him. Why utilize them, then? Miguel has a faint smile. Because there's a difference between suspecting a trick and seeing through it. Despite his intelligence, Kane is predictable due to his pride. He won't be aware that our lies are concealing something else, so he will believe he can see through them. Sheriff Hawkins looks at his timepiece. Dawn is 2 hours away. Not much time. Enough time. Miguel starts to unfold the maps. Put your men in place, Frank. Go ahead and distribute those flares, Linda. Emily. He stops and looks into her anxious eyes. Hold Ethan near you. What is about to happen? He must see it. Must realize that being the strongest or quickest isn't always the best way to stand up. Being the smartest is the goal. The best prepared. Ethan is thrilled to be included, but Emily notices something concerning about Miguel's face. Are you not telling us everything? What about your plan? No. Miguel confesses in a low voice. Because Kane will be in town with spies. People we trust who have been intimidated or bought off. People can't disclose as much as they know. The rain outside starts to lessen. But it appears that the darkness is growing. Kane and his phantom riders are making their own plans somewhere. On the horizon, Red and the Iron Raiders are gathering like thunder clouds. Mr. Valdez. Ethan has a tiny yet resolute voice. Will we prevail? Despite his advanced age, Miguel moves fluidly as he kneels to meet the boy's eyes. Son, it's not always about who survives to win. Sometimes it comes down to your values. Keep it in mind. It may be the most crucial lesson I ever impart to you. Thunder Basin waits for the storm to break as the night becomes darker and closer to morning. However, Miguel Valdez recognizes that some storms are required as he observes the darkness with steady hands and a clear head. They purify the air, erase the past, and create space for justice to at last establish itself on sordid soil. Over Thunder Basin, false dawn creeps in. When the rain eventually stopped, a thick fog hung over the streets like a shroud. Ethan holds his breath as he observes the strain in his mentor's posture as Miguel Valdez stands in the shadows of the diner's back entrance, observing the fog through eyes that see what others miss. Miguel points to a faint movement in the mist and murmurs, "There. Observe their movements. Squads of 3 men. Coordinated. Expert. Dark figures float between buildings via the fog." In the pre-dawn light, the Phantom Riders are exactly what their name suggests, more shadow than substance. Miguel, however, sees what others do not. Their motions' military accuracy. How each team fills in the gaps for the others. He still teaches quietly to 8 of them today. Up Main Street are 2 3-person teams. Through the alleys, 2 more flank. Observe how they look around. Ex-military. Most likely, special forces. Kane always made the best hires. Emily is inside the diner, watching Sheriff Hawkins place his deputies through the window. The village appears better guarded than it actually is because of the realistic shadows cast by the mannequins in the upper windows. A voice suddenly breaks through the haze. The mannequins are a wonderful touch, and the setup is impressive, old man. Did you learn that one in Montana? Miguel's stance changes a little. His posture was one of recognition. Still imitating men's tricks rather than developing your own, mirror. Out of the fog, a figure appears standing in the center of the road. His posture is uncannily similar. Miguel has the same easy readiness. He even has the exact same rifle rig as Miguel. Mirror exclaims, "I've studied your style for 15 years. Every witness statement, police report, and competition footage. I am aware of your shooting, movement, and thought processes. I've changed into you, better, younger, and quicker." Miguel calmly responds, "Then you've learned the wrong lessons. Style serves just as window dressing. What's behind it is what counts." There is no comedy in Mirror's laugh. "Old man, philosophy won't save you today. Kane desires your survival. Prefers to settle accounts slowly." However, he made no mention of not destroying the goods. Miguel's hand on Ethan's shoulder holds him motionless while he tenses. "Now, son, pay close attention. I mentioned that people only see what they expect to see. Do you recall that?" Almost simultaneously, one of the Phantom Rider groups emerges from hiding and advances on the diner. Professionally, they are good. Miguel, however, sees what they do not. He whispers into a hidden radio now, "Frank." Railroad flares suddenly light up windows and rooftops, illuminating the roadway with a bright red glow. The fog becomes red, impairing the Phantom Rider's ability to see at night and creating erratic shadows that make it hard to tell mannequins from actual danger. Mirror responds immediately. The exact same dive for cover that Miguel would make. However, Miguel remains motionless, which causes Mirror's timing to be incorrect. "See, boy." Miguel speaks to Ethan in a whisper. He has forgotten to think for himself because he is so preoccupied replicating what he believes I would do. The Phantom Riders are shaken but swiftly recover. Their method's meticulous coordination is flawed. Now that they know exactly where to keep an eye on the red-tinted pandemonium, Sheriff Hawkins' deputies are in a better position. Mirror exclaims, "Not bad," with a fresh sharpness in his voice. But you're playing for time, and we both know it. Kane is on his way, and when he arrives. Set. Miguel interrupts, he'll make the same mistake you're making when he gets here. I believe this has to do with shooting. About who can shoot a gun quicker or better. He can be heard plainly over the fog. That was never the point of this. As though to show how Miguel's hand can move with such unfathomable speed. There are 3 shots that sound like one since they are so close together. With their swords flying and each one striking in precisely the same area, 3 phantom riders let out a startled shout. Mira reacts right away, and his drawing is an exact replica of Miguel's method. However, he is shooting at Miguel's intended location. The old man should move where his style dictates. Rather, Miguel does a very unexpected action. He takes a step into the open. As the rounds from Mira travel through empty air, Miguel calmly states, that's the difference between copying and understanding. The surface is the only thing reflected by a mirror. What's underlying is hidden. More flares light up. The phantom riders are now enmeshed in a conflagration of light and shadow. Every window might conceal a mannequin or a police officer. While their opponents stay disguised, every move they make is revealed. Mira commands you to pull back. His voice was filled with frustration. At point beta, regroup. We didn't plan on fighting like this. Ethan can hardly contain his enthusiasm as the phantom riders retreat. That was incredible. How did you know they would be duped? For, son, they're professionals. Professional strategies are expected by professionals. Doing something that no expert would think to do is sometimes the wisest course of action. Miguel looks at the fading darkness. However, this was only a test. Kane dispatched them to investigate our fortifications and discover our capabilities. Emily arrives at the door with a worried yet relieved expression on her face. Will they return? Miguel concurs. With Kane at the head. They will now believe they understand the situation. An elderly man attempting to postpone the inevitable with some cunning maneuvers. There is no comedy in his smile. Let them believe that. Sheriff Hawkins comes over with his gun holstered. During the struggle, Hunter Richards was spotted by 4 of my deputies. From the roof of the hardware shop, he observed. Didn't participate, only watched. Miguel nods, good. This indicates that Kane is keeping him close and has faith in him for reconnaissance. Later on, that will be helpful. Mr. Valdez. Now Ethan's voice is reflective. The mirror. He shoots in the same way as you, but in a different way. Empty. Son, you're right. Because he gained knowledge about how, but not why. He understands the mechanics, but not the significance. Miguel checks his firearm as if it were second nature. And that will be the end of him. His, Kane's, and all those who believe that violence is about skill rather than intention. As the early light grows, Thunder Basin is left behind as the crimson flares start to sputter away. However, everyone is aware that this was only the first move of a far more complex game. Kane is on his way, taking the Iron Raiders and all of his Phantom Riders with him. Miguel Valdez is aware that the true test isn't about shooting, tactics, or even survival as he observes the sun rising over his chosen home with steady hands and a clear goal. It has to do with fairness. After a long wait, it is now within reach. Only when a man takes a stand, not because he wants to fight, but because someone needs to put himself in the way of evil and its victims, can justice be served. When dawn arrives in Thunder Basin, the town is changed as the early sun burns away the last traces of fog. It's the mark of the Phantom Rider's probe. There are bullet-scarred walls, broken windows, and an airborne tension that is oppressive. Ethan observes Miguel Valdez from the access ladder as he stands on the roof of the diner, his sharp eyes searching the horizon. Any pretense of infirmity or aging is gone. The man on guard glides with the smooth elegance of a predator, each movement deliberate and accurate. Miguel holds up one hand and says, "Listen." Ethan doesn't hear anything at first. Then it comes, a deep rumble that gets louder by the second, but this time it's not just motorcycles, it's something larger. What is that? Miguel is in motion when Ethan asks. Enter. Right now. Tell Frank and your mom to clean up the streets. Let's all take refuge. Kane is coming into view. Even seasoned deputies are taken aback by the image that emerges from the town's main entrance. A caravan of motorbikes, their chrome shining in the morning sun, are led by a huge black Suburban. With red and iron on either side of the car, the Iron Raiders ride escort. The Phantom Riders, who appear more machine than human due to their black leather and mirrored visors, move in perfect formation behind them. Joining Miguel at the window of the diner, Emily remarks, "Quite a reception. This is all for one elderly man." "Not for me," Miguel says softly. "It's for them." Kane is demonstrating his strength and dominance and ensuring that everyone is aware of who is truly in command. In the center of Main Street, the Suburban comes to a stop. While the Phantom Riders occupy key spots, the Iron Raiders create a perimeter. Directly behind the car is a mirror. His posture was an exact replica of Miguel's laid-back preparedness. Marcus Kane exits the driver's door and enters the bright dawn. He appears tall and impressive, wearing a pricey suit that contrasts with the jeans and leathers. His motions are controlled and elegant, and his silver hair is combed to perfection. His eyes alone reveal who he really is, cold and lifeless as a winter midnight. Kane's voice, calibrated to reach every part of the quiet village, carries easily, "Miguel. It's a long time between drinks, 15 years. Let's speak about the good old days when you come down." Miguel gently stops Sheriff Hawkins as he approaches the door. He wants us to react to him, to draw us out, and to wait for him, Frank. The lack of response doesn't appear to worry Kane. He examines the town with a few steps, much like a man contemplating a real estate acquisition. "You have a nice setup here. The windows, the flares, the well-placed mannequins, all of these were recognizable. Your handling of Mirror's team, which taught them that sometimes the apparent choice is the incorrect one, was very impressive." He stops, gazing up at the several windows that could conceal defenders. "However, isn't that what you do? Teach others about justice and consequences, just as you taught me at Shadow Creek." As he talks of loss, his smile wanes. Ethan whispers as he watches from behind the bar, "Unlike the others, he doesn't appear frightening." Miguel responds that's what makes him dangerous. On the outside, the others display their violence. Wrapped in charm and logic, Kane conceals his. Makes it simpler for him to build relationships and gain people's trust. Kane raises his arms wide as though he's heard this evaluation. "Old acquaintance, no answer. I assumed you would want to hear the truth about those girls' fates. Who employed you on behalf of their families? Those whose remains were never discovered." The diner's temperature appears to plummet. Emily reaches out and grabs Ethan's shoulder, drawing him in. Kane goes on, his voice clear in the morning air, "You see. Profit and territory weren't the only factors at Shadow Creek. It was a test. A measure of the lengths people would go to in order to preserve their privileged lives. If the violence remained on the periphery, how long would they ignore it? Only those that society had already forgotten were targeted." Miguel's eyes display a profound, controlled wrath, yet his hand stays solid on his revolver. Quietly, he murmurs, "He's taunting us. Wanting an emotional response from us. Make errors." With his pricey sneakers clicking on the sidewalk, Kane starts to stroll once more. "Miguel, you didn't turn your head away, did you? You needed to be the hero. You had to bring your reputation, your badge, and your flawless aim. I had to destroy what I had created." He pauses and turns to face the diner. "And here we are now. Me with my new company, which is bigger and better than the one I had previously. You with your shaking hands and your small town. It's time to find out who has actually learned from the past. As Kane talks, Hunter Richard stands with the Iron Raiders, his face displaying a range of emotions. His hand veers toward his gun and then drops away, as Miguel observes. He is not yet prepared to reveal his true loyalty. Kane yells, "Last chance, Miguel. Maybe I will allow these decent people to continue living comfortable lives if you come out and confront me like a man. Remain hidden." He gives a graceful shrug. Well, compared to what comes next, Shadow Creek will seem like a happy memory. Miguel finally makes his way to the door of the diner. Emily takes hold of his arm before he can open it, though. "Don't, Miguel. He's attempting to take your hand away." "No," Miguel says quietly. He's outlining his strategy. Sometimes letting a man believe he's winning is the greatest way to figure out his approach. He gives Ethan a look. "Son, do you recall what I said about interpreting signs? Focus on Kane's eyes rather than his hands. A man's eyes reveal his true thoughts." Miguel exits onto the street with a smooth ease. As he confronts the man who has plagued law enforcement nightmares for 15 years, his hands remain completely unshaken. "Hi, Marcus." When Miguel teaches Ethan about cloud patterns, his voice has the same soft tone. "Are you still hiding behind numbers? Are you still playing puppet master and allowing others take the chances?" Although Kane's eyes sparkle with threat, his smile never falters. "You're still attempting to impart knowledge." However, the lesson for today has nothing to do with morality or justice. It has to do with power. Actual power. The kind that results from understanding the extent to which men can be inspired. Two men, one dressed in pricey luxury and the other exuding quiet competence, confront each other as the sun rises higher above Thunder Basin, creating long shadows across Main Street. 15 years of history, red shed, and unresolved issues lie between them. And as Ethan observes from the diner window, he at last comprehends the lesson his mentor has been attempting to impart to him. The storms that bring thunder and lightning aren't always the most deadly. Sometimes they arrive smiling and wearing suits, concealing their aggression with reasonable words until it's too late to stop them. Miguel Valdez and Marcus Kane stand facing each other across 30 yards of dust and history as the morning light beats down on Thunder Basin's Main Street. In order to create an arena for what is about to happen, Phantom Riders retain their places on nearby roofs while Iron Raiders guard their perimeter. What have I been pondering for the past 15 years? In the uncomfortable silence, Kane's refined voice carries effortlessly. What was your remuneration from those families? To put everything at risk? To destroy what I had created? Nothing, Miguel responds, standing calmly yet attentively. Marcus, there are things you do because they must be done, but you've never understood why. Kane's eyes harden, yet his flawless smile never falters. He points to the gathered forces around them, still the idealist who believes that morals and justice govern the universe. Take a look around, my friend. The real world operates like this. Fear, control, and power. Ethan observes carefully, taking in every scene from the doorway of the diner. Miguel's posture, totally calm in spite of the surroundings. The faint strain in Kane's shoulder that exposes his self-assured exterior. Miguel says, "Tell me something," in the same soft tone he used while instructing. "Did you kill the girls at Shadow Creek yourself? Or did you do it with Red? I've always questioned whether you had the guts to do things yourself." It's a poignant question. For a brief moment, Kane's smile falters, revealing something unsightly underneath. "Miguel, are you trying to aggravate me? Are you trying to make me do something wrong?" He fiddles with his pricey suit jacket. "Shadow Creek taught me. Discovered that becoming overly interested is a sign of weakness. I have personnel for that now because of it. Similar to a mirror." Miguel gives the Phantom Rider behind Kane a nod. A man learns to imitate the style of others for 15 years. He isn't truly himself anymore, is he? Kane lifts a hand to halt any reaction as mirror stiffens. A clever tactic. Are you attempting to incite my people against me? Make them question. He laughs. You've always worked that way, though. Identifying the weak areas. The rifts in allegiance. No, Marcus. I'm only stating what everyone is already aware of. You have no followers. You have equipment. When someone is no longer helpful, you use them and then throw them away. Kane notices Hunter Richards moving uncomfortably amid the Iron Raiders. The crime leader narrows his eyes a little. Assessing. Making calculations. Kane goes on without incident, talking about tools. How is the tremor? Believable performance during the previous 5 years. I nearly thought you had truly lost your edge. Nearly. Miguel responds quietly, just as you said. The most obvious tricks are sometimes the best ones. Kane starts to circle slowly. Little clouds of dust rose from his pricey sneakers. Miguel, do you know what's wrong? You have a small mind. That level of skill. That standing. And how do you use it? Pretend to appear innocuous when hiding in a small town. Defending those who have no idea what is out there. Miguel responds, you think too big, so committed to establishing your kingdom. The decaying foundations go unnoticed. Uncertainty appears on Kane's face for the first time. What is the intended meaning of that? Work things out. Remember, you're the wise one. The chess master, who is constantly anticipating 3 moves. Miguel's eyes briefly lock with Hunter's. But occasionally, things don't go as planned. Emily notices a difference in the scene outside as she watches from inside the diner, her hands clenched around Ethan's shoulders. The Iron Raiders made slight changes in their stance. Riders exchange quick looks. Kane also notices it. His flawless composure faltered a little. Kane yells, enough games. You are outnumbered and surrounded. My Phantom Riders are pros, but your tiny pranks with flares and mannequins might work on average thugs. There is only one way this can end. Miguel agrees somewhat, you're right. This does have a conclusion. However, you're repeating your Shadow Creek error. Believing that power comes from possessing the most guns. Additionally, you're erroneously believing that your reputation will keep you safe. Rider Phantoms. Kane's commanding voice cracks. Assume your stations. Protect the perimeter, Iron Raiders. Nobody comes or goes from this village without my approval. Miguel stands motionless, observing Kane with eyes that see too much as the riders shift to conform. Marcus, tell me something. Did you ever question why I actually allowed you to escape that night throughout the 15 years you spent creating your new empire? The question strikes like a punch to the body. Kane becomes even less composed. Genuine rage is evident. Permit me. I couldn't do anything because of you. I was smarter, so I got away. Because I prepared for all possible outcomes. Did you? There is a weight to Miguel's voice that draws everyone in. Or did you flee because I was curious about who you had fled to? Who were your true contacts? The people who helped you conceal for so long. Kane's expression changes from one of understanding to one of rage. Marcus, you son of a language. Miguel gently interrupts. There is a kid here. Additionally, he is gaining a valuable understanding of the distinction between appearing and actually possessing power. Ethan abruptly understands what his mentor is referring about while he is still standing in the doorway. In fact, the Phantom Riders have become estranged from one another due to their professional and tactical stances. There are gaps around the Thunder Knight's perimeter that appear random but aren't. Miguel has been moving pieces on a board that only he can see clearly with every action and every word he has spoken. Marcus, do you realize what your true issue is? Miguel keeps going with confident, firm hands by his sides. You've been playing puppet master for so long that you've lost sight of what it is to stand up for something. To represent something. A loud noise interrupts Kane's reply. Sirens of the police, far away but getting closer. Numerous cars, approaching from various angles. Do you recall the connections I mentioned? Miguel's eyes are as hard as steel, but his grin is kind. As it turns out, they were keen to revisit the Shadow Creek investigation, particularly in light of fresh information regarding the possible location of those girls' bodies. A scene on the verge of violence is framed by strong shadows as the morning sun climbs higher above Thunder Basin. Everyone in the room knows that they are witnessing more than simply a fight between two men at this very time. They are seeing the clash of two ideologies, one based on justice and principle, the other on power and fear. And Ethan Brooks discovers what may be the most significant lesson of them as he observes his mentor confront evil in the form of a person. The justice of your cause and the steadfastness of your goal are what truly define your strength, not the quantity of allies you command. The early silence of Thunder Basin is broken by the shriek of sirens approaching. As Kane turns to confront Red and Iron, his calm exterior breaks. Put our people in their proper places. Right now. Reflect. Look after those police officers. Miguel's voice, however, breaks through the confusion before anyone can move. Marcus, it's too late. They are more than just the local police. You've been hiding from federal task forces, state police, marshals, and all of those contacts for 15 years. This is the very moment they had been waiting for. Then, Hunter Richards moves away from the Iron Raiders to make his move. Kane, he's being honest. The warrants are visible to me. They are well informed. Shadow Creek. The girls who went missing. The firearm is in motion. Everything. Kane responds quickly and viciously. He reaches under his suit jacket and pulls out a tiny automatic. However, Miguel's hand moves with that unfathomable speed before he can aim at Hunter. Kane's rifle spins away as the bullet strikes it precisely. Miguel says quietly, "You're still telegraphing your moves, Marcus. You're still being careless because you're angry." With expert accuracy, the Phantom Riders respond, moving into concealed positions as Mirror advances. His posture was an exact replica of Miguel's. "Give orders, sir." Kane becomes gruff in his refined speech. "Take them out. Take them all out. If you must, burn this entire town." Like a desert storm, the violence breaks out. Miguel is already on the move when Phantom Riders start shooting from their spots. His movements were fluid and well practiced. Each of the 3 rounds that are fired finds its target with surgical accuracy. Disabling shots instead of killing them, causing weapons to fly. "Get down, Ethan." As the windows above the diner break, Emily tugs her son below the counter. From locations they have established, Sheriff Hawkins and his men return fire. Making the most out of the chaos. Miguel flows like water through it all. Every action is deliberate and exact. They are defeated by the expert strategies of the Phantom Riders. To someone who knows their mentality, their training makes them predictable. Miguel yells, "Watch carefully, son," being aware that even with Emily's safety, Ethan is still watching. Observe how they form a group. How do they adhere to established tactical patterns? That is the drawback of depending too much on instruction rather than comprehension. Mirror enters the road. Miguel's style is perfectly reflected in his motions. "Old father, let's see which student is superior." However, Miguel doesn't respond as Mirror anticipates. Rather than evacuating, he maintains his position. "Learner? Son, you haven't even arrived in class yet. I'll explain why." In Thunder Basin, what follows becomes the stuff of legend. Miguel's renowned quickness is precisely matched by Mirror's drawl. Miguel, however, does not sketch. Rather, he advances into Mirror's path of Phi. Miguel says calmly, First lesson, as mirror's shot misses because of the sudden movement. Only what a mirror perceives can be reflected. It is unable to comprehend the why of the what. 3 more phantom riders instantly lose the ability to utilize their weapons as 3 more shots ring out. Captured with an almost unfathomable accuracy. For the first time, Kane displays genuine terror as he hides behind his Suburban. Get the raiders in there, Red, Iron. Give him too many numbers. The Iron Raiders are hesitant, though. They've been rattled by Hunter's confession. And many have begun to doubt their allegiance after witnessing Miguel's demonstration of skill while deciding not to kill. Miguel shouts, "Give it some thought, boys." It was easy to hear his voice over the shooting. Kane's options are dwindling. Men like him begin to view everyone as disposable when that occurs. Even their own citizens. Kane abruptly seizes one of the younger raiders and uses him as a shield, perhaps to demonstrate his point. Take action. Here is where you can attack or begin to die. The Iron Raider's moment of truth comes. Hunter makes things simpler by pulling out his weapon to shoot at Kane rather than Miguel. You're done, boss. Don't exacerbate the situation. Mirror makes a final, desperate attempt as his flawless plan comes apart. He imitates Miguel's well-known two-gun approach by drawing both weapons. However, Miguel does something surprising once more. He puts his gun in his holster. As Mirror's confidence falters, Miguel says, "This is the last lesson. Copying maneuvers is not a sign of true skill. Knowing when not to use them at all is the key." Now the sirens are extremely near. Kane backs toward an alley while continuing to use the young motorcyclist as a shield. It's not over yet. Do you hear me? This pales in comparison to what lies ahead. Miguel responds in that same soft voice he employs while instructing, "Actually, Marcus. It was more than 15 years ago. You simply were unaware of it until now." Over Thunder Basin, the morning sun approaches its zenith, as police cars start pulling up from all sides. With their tactical edge gone, the Phantom Riders must decide between giving up and taking their own lives. The Iron Raiders start laying down weapons after losing their allegiance to Kane. Ethan observes everything from the diner and gains the most crucial lesson to date. Sometimes, having the patience to wait for justice to be served naturally is more important than having the fastest gun. However, everyone in the room is aware of the same fact as Miguel Valdez watches Kane vanish into the alley, his eyes stern and his hands steady. It's not over yet. The final conflict between justice and retribution, the actual storm, is still to come. Following the gunfight, the streets of Thunder Basin reverberate with turmoil. Police cars scream to a stop at different crossroads as Iron Raiders who are surrendering raise their hands, their allegiance to Kane broken by his willingness to sacrifice them. Miguel Valdez reads signs that others miss while standing in the center of the road with a composed yet vigilant stance. The young biker Kane knocked aside during his escape is now trembling on the ground where he used him as a barrier. "Are you alright, son?" As he helps the young man up, Miguel asks. To buy himself a few more seconds, the biker stammers, "He was going to kill me." "He's always been that way," Miguel says softly. "Some of you simply took longer to notice it." Sheriff Hawkins moves closer, using his radio to coordinate with the oncoming police. The east and north entrances are guarded by state police. The FBI is erecting barriers to the west and south. He's not making much progress. Miguel remarks, looking around the layout of the village, "He's not trying to." Frank, Marcus Kane doesn't actually run. He seeks new ways to attack, reorganizes, and redirects. Ethan moves closer to hear his mentor's observations after slipping out of Emily's protective embrace. "How are you aware?" He thinks like a chess player, constantly laying the groundwork for the next move or gambit. Miguel examines the alley where Kane vanished, his gaze narrowing. "What's inside those structures at the end of that lane, Hunter?" Hunter Richards consults a mental map while actively assisting law enforcement. On the left is an abandoned old warehouse. The train service tunnel system is connected to the hardware shop on the right. Miguel nods. The tunnels. He's on his way there. Half of the town's historic buildings are connected via an underground network. Ideal for ambush point setup and regrouping. Mirror, now disarmed and under arrest, chuckles sourly. You still don't understand. Kane won't flee from you. You're being led by him. With him, everything is a trap. No, Miguel gently corrects. I get it completely. The question is, do you? Did you ever wonder why I gave the impression that I was becoming wobbly and slow after all those years of learning my techniques? Mirror's expression changes to one of understanding as Emily joins them. Her face revealed a fresh understanding of Miguel's long-term strategy. Because sometimes, she explains gently, tricking someone into believing they are the ones doing the catching is the greatest way to catch them. That's right. Miguel checks his firearm as if it were second nature. Kane believes he's enticing us into a fight of his own. There are many shadows, dark areas, and cramped confines. Believes that his phantom riders have an advantage because of their tactical training. Does it not? When Ethan asks, his mother gives him a stern look. Remember I told you that people only see what they expect to see, son. Even now, Miguel's voice has its instructive tone. Kane anticipates that, like his pros, I will adhere to regular tactical procedure. Expects me to play it cautiously, move slowly, and avoid obstacles. Sheriff Hawkins points to his deputies and the federal agents who are coming. We can wait him out and establish a perimeter. No, Miguel gives a headshake. That's his desire. It's time to become organized. To make the tunnels a place of death. We enter now, but not in the manner he anticipates. Hunter moves forward. Those tunnels are familiar to me. Make use of them to store supplies. Organizing activities. I am able to assist. Excellent. Because down there, Kane is not alone. He was pursued by Red and Iron, along with perhaps 4 or 5 phantom riders who escaped in the pandemonium. They will be preparing ambush spots and establishing defensive positions. Emily takes Miguel by the arm. Going down there against those odds in their area is not an option. Have to, says Miguel plainly. Now that Kane is desperate guys are more willing to take chances. He will begin using citizens as shields to take hostages if we wait. Who backed into a corner like that? In order to hide his escape, he would set the entire town on fire. When Ethan looks at his mentor's face, he sees the legendary tactical mind rather than the kind elderly man who taught him about cloud patterns. You will do something surprising once more, won't you? You're a smart boy. Miguel grins. Mirror researched me for years, so Kane believes he understands my playbook. Mirror, however, just looked at what he could see. Shoots are used in competition. Documented methods. Reports from witnesses. The other aspect of my work was never explained to him. The sections that were left out of the reports. Sheriff Hawkins nods in comprehension of the martial activities. The ones that were kept under wraps. That's right. A gunfighter is what Kane is anticipating. Rather, he will encounter something he has never comprehended. A man who discovered that being the fastest or most accurate isn't always the best strategy for winning. Being the most patient is important at times. The sound of running feet in the tunnels below is followed by a distant explosion from underneath, as if to accentuate his point. Miguel calmly states, that'll be Red and Carson, attempting to control our access routes by placing charges at strategic intersections. They are unaware that they are not securing us, but he makes one last check of his weapon. They are confining themselves. With you, Ethan continues, his voice containing equal parts adoration and concern. Justice was served, even though it was 15 years late. Miguel looks at Emily. Protect him. What will happen next? It's inappropriate for a boy to witness. Ethan, however, lets forth a final cry as Miguel approaches the tunnel opening. "Do you recall what you taught me about storms, Mr. Valdez? About how if you just remain steady, the largest ones blow themselves out." Miguel stops and turns to look back proudly. "Son, you're right. What's going on down there? It's just a different sort of storm. After 15 years of construction, it is finally ready to break." As Miguel Valdez vanishes into the tunnel system's darkness, his hands steady and his steps sure, the morning sun rises higher over Thunder Basin. Law enforcement protects the community above ground while an increasing number of Iron Raiders and Phantom Riders surrender. In the shadows beneath their feet, however, a man who has been feigning innocuousness for 5 years is getting ready to demonstrate to Marcus Kane why some legends never die. They simply wait for the ideal opportunity to remind everyone of their initial status as legendary. Miguel Valdez enters the underground tube system of Thunder Basin and is enveloped in darkness. With decades of dust and the lingering scent of creosote from ancient railroad ties, the air gets colder. His footsteps are silent. A talent acquired in operations that were never officially reported. Above ground, Ethan strains to hear what's going on below by pressing against the basement window of the hardware store. Standing behind him, Emily is caught between wanting to know what's happening and wanting to bring him to safety. Hunter points to a crude map and tells Sheriff Hawkins and the gathered law enforcement personnel that there are 3 major intersections. They will be choke spots for Kane. Iron and Red are familiar with these passageways. They have been using them to plan operations and store weaponry for months. Miguel creeps like a shadow in the darkness below, his ears picking up on inconspicuous sounds that convey narratives. The metallic click of a weapon being examined, the distant scratch of a boot on concrete, and the hushed voices of desperate men. Divide. The faint echo of Kane's words reverberates through the tunnels. Discuss every strategy. He'll take precautions and approach each section gradually. That will be his error. Miguel remembers what Ethan said about storms and grins in the dark. Kane continues to believe that he is up against a traditional foe who will adhere to tactical philosophy. However, some storms don't behave in predictable ways. Around a curve, a Phantom Rider emerges, his confidence bolstered by night vision goggles. Miguel moves with the fluidity of a liquid. The man is put calmly aside, disarmed and unconscious before he can lift his weapon. They are too silent. From someplace up ahead comes the voice of Red. "By now, you ought to have heard something." "Stop talking," Iron retorts. "As instructed by the boss, set those charges." He needs to have his movement patterns controlled. Miguel takes the night vision goggles off the fallen Phantom Rider but does not put them on. He puts them in his pocket instead. Sometimes having too much clarity might work against you. It forces you to depend on what is apparent rather than what is present. Hunter resumes his briefing above ground. Kane may have 8 men with him down there. Red, Iron, 2 Iron Raiders who remained faithful, and 4 Phantom Riders. Against a single man. An FBI officer laughs. Sheriff Hawkins corrects in a low voice. Against a legend who allowed everyone to believe he was innocuous for 5 years. There is a distinction. Miguel makes steady progress through the tunnels, reading the darkness like others read books. He learns something from every sound and change in air circulation. He senses that Kane's people are dispersing in an attempt to trap him with a net. However, they don't comprehend. Becoming the fisherman is sometimes the greatest way to deal with a net. The underground system is rocked by a muted explosion. In its aftermath, Red's voice is audible. The third junction was shut. It's time for him to enter the main queue. Miguel murmurs to himself, "Amateur. Describing your actions in detail to everyone." His boots scrape a little on the concrete as he moves differently now. Making just enough noise to attract attention and be noticed. Kane's voice rises once more, this time with excitement. "Can you hear that? The main tunnel is where he is. Bring everyone together and push him in the direction of Junction 2. Miguel is not in the main tunnel, though. A little radio that was seized from the deceased Phantom Rider and placed carefully next to a drain pipe that transmits sound throughout the system is the source of the sounds. The simplest strategies might occasionally be the most effective. There's a problem. There is the first hint of anxiety in Iron's voice. He's not supposed to act like this. Mirror said he would be cautious and methodical. Mirror researched shooting competitions. Kane retaliates. This isn't the same. This is. His awareness comes too late, and he wanders off. Actually, this is what I do. In the darkness, Miguel's voice seems to emanate from both everywhere and nowhere. My actions prior to competitions, badges, and rules and regulations. In a panic, a Phantom Rider shoots at shadows. His night vision is destroyed by the muzzle flash, which also makes his position visible. 2 calm and accurate shots ring out. Shots travel through the man's sleeves without breaking skin, and he is trapped to the wall as his weapon goes flying. There are 8 rounds remaining. The echo of Miguel's voice. More than sufficient. Marcus, do you want to know why? Because the most crucial photos are the ones you don't take, as I discovered long ago. While your adversary spends ammunition on shadows, you keep them in reserve. Kane loses all of his composure. Track him down. Now find him. Iron, Red. Get your reputation back. However, Red and Iron are beginning to realize their true situation. They don't recall this competition shooter. This is not the same thing. Something that seems to have been born in the dark. That works against them using their own strategies. Red's voice trembles a little, boss. Perhaps we ought to. What should be done? Kane growls. Give up. Give him the victory. After 15 years of preparation, construction, and anticipation. No, Miguel's voice returns, this time closer. After running for 15 years. Of concealing oneself behind others. Of playing puppet master and letting individuals like Red and Iron take the chances. Marcus, that's over tonight. Ethan abruptly takes Emily's arm in the basement of the hardware store. Mr. Valdez, pay attention. He's not merely battling them. They are fighting themselves because of him. Indeed, the sounds coming from below depict an increasingly chaotic situation. Phantom Riders shooting at each other and at shadows. In the face of an enemy they cannot see or predict, their professional training is disintegrating. Iron and Red quarrel over which tunnel to use. And all the while, Kane's orders became more and more desperate. Each one reveals more about his mental state and position. With increasing adoration, Hunter exclaims, he's hurting them. Driving them precisely where he desires them to go by using their own actions and fears. Another explosion reverberates across the subterranean darkness. This time, smaller and better managed. Then there was quiet, interrupted only by Kane's voice. With an edge of real fear now. Who are you? Miguel's answer is succinct yet direct. I am the result of justice having to hide behind a facade of weakness. When it is necessary for right to appear innocuous. When good men must concede the victory to evil. All the way to the moment of truth. The tunnel storm intensifies till it reaches its peak. And it is perceptible to everyone above Earth. Only Ethan, who has retained all of his mentor's teachings, fully comprehends what is taking place. If you just stay steady, the biggest storms blow themselves out, he whispers. The network of tunnels beneath Thunder Basin is dark. With Kane's remaining men firing at shadows, the only interruptions are sporadic muzzle flashes. Their worsening circumstances are seen in flashes. Phantom Riders retreating into corners. Carson and Red standing side by side. Kane's pricey outfit is now ripped and dirty. A status update. There is a hint of frenzy in Kane's voice. A phantom rider replies, "We've lost contact with Team 2. Someone tell me where he is." He broke his professional composure. Rodriguez and Thompson are not answering. Miguel's voice reverberates through the tunnels since they are occupied napping. Similar to the others. "Marcus, have you noticed that no one is dead? Have you noticed how each shot has been accurate, deliberate, and controlled?" Ethan places his ear to the basement floor above ground, deciphering the noises of the underground conflict. He murmurs to Emily that he's not simply pounding them. He is imparting knowledge to them. What is it about? With a firm grip on her son's shoulder, Emily asks. Regarding the distinction between possessing power and being able to wield it effectively. Red and Carson are forced toward Junction 2 in the tunnels. Debris that wasn't previously there inexplicably blocked their intended escape route. With his gunfighter's bluster gone, Carson murmurs, "This is wrong." Mirror, who studied him for years, claimed that he was predictable and systematic. "This is not the same thing." Mirror examined what I desired for others to see. From somewhere in the shadows, Miguel's voice may be heard. In Thunder Basin, Kane only saw what he was expecting to see. An elderly man, hiding from his past, with trembling hands. Kane shoots furiously into the darkness as he twists. "You believe you're so smart? Setting your traps and playing your games? I have hostages left." "No, Marcus, you've got desperate men who are beginning to see that they made a mistake." Well, a pause. "Red, isn't that correct?" Red's reaction is full of insight. "The Shadow Creek girls. Kane, didn't you kill them yourself? Didn't even have faith in us." "Of course I did," snarls Kane. "Do you think I would entrust something so significant to goons like you? You were merely the handy suspects, the cover tail, in case something went wrong." It's clear from Carson's sudden intake of air. Kane's disdain destroyed 15 years of devotion. Above ground, Hunter tells the gathered police enforcement what their surveillance gear is picking up. Kane is displaying his actual self while he is losing it. Using that, Miguel is inciting his people to oppose him. Sheriff Hawkins says, "Just like you turned." "No," Hunter gives a headshake. "I decided to turn." The truth that these men have been avoiding for years is finally being revealed to them. Miguel's voice carries on, steady and serene in the darkness below. "Marcus, tell me something. Spending all those years in hiding, creating your new business, and surrounding yourself with experts and murderers. Have you ever wondered why I chose to live in Thunder Basin?" There is a hint of craziness in Kane's laugh. "Because you were also hiding, acting helpless, and acting innocuous." "No, because I knew you would eventually come across me and that you couldn't pass up the opportunity to demonstrate your superior strength, intelligence, and abilities. And there was a meaningful pause when you did. To put it simply, Thunder Basin is more than just a town. It's a trap. One that you have been entering for the past 5 years." Kane feels the knowledge as if it were a bodily blow. All of a sudden, every shadow appears darker. Each sound has greater significance. His tactical preparations and meticulous plans may all be a part of something bigger. He was too busy searching for what he thought he would discover to notice anything. "You're lying," but there's no conviction in his voice. "Am I?" "Marcus, give it some thought. You're hiding in the tunnels. I've spent the last 5 years getting to know them all. The tactical benefits of the Phantom Rider. For decades, I have been practicing neutralizing those same moves. Mirror, too. Did you really think I was unaware that my old competition films were being viewed by someone?" In the dark, Red and Iron exchange glances. They abruptly question what they believe to be true about their circumstances. "Master?" Red's voice trembles a bit. "Perhaps we ought to quit talking." Under stress, Kane's command falters. Every unit returns to Alpha position. The numbers are still available. The strength of fire. Marcus, numbers are meaningless in the dark. Remember how you taught me that? Shadow Creek. When did you conceal your actions from those girls during the night? Miguel's tone becomes sterner. However, darkness is reciprocal. Justice may occasionally be concealed until the ideal time to act. The radio of a phantom rider crackles. We are no longer in contact with the surface, sir. Our communications are being blocked by something. Miguel calmly explains that the storm drains. Sound is transmitted throughout the system by them. Make my voice sound like it's coming from everywhere and let me hear everything you say. It's an old trick, but it works. Particularly against men who believe they are better than simple strategy because of their tactical expertise. Ethan instantly realizes, still hearing from above. He's doing more than just winning battles. They're defeating themselves because of him. Emily also notices it. Miguel's words remove yet another degree of Kane's authority. Exposes yet another weakness in his meticulously crafted facade of authority. Last chance. Through the darkness, Miguel's voice is audible. Give up now. Exit with some dignity. Or keep going. And find out why I let people to believe I was innocuous for 5 years. In retaliation, Kane unleashes a barrage of gunshots that reverberates throughout the cramped area. I constructed this. Everything. A washed-up cop cannot take it away. Again, Marcus, wrong. Nothing was built by you. You just adapted what others had created to suit your needs. But tonight, that will stop. Even the seasoned Phantom Riders sense something they haven't felt in years as the darkness seems to grow deeper. Actual terror. Because a legend they believe to be merely a story moves in that darkness. A man whose greatest strength was his seeming frailty. Ethan Brooks comprehends the last lesson his instructor attempted to impart to him while Thunder Basin waits its breath, anticipating the storm below to erupt. The lightning that everyone sees isn't always the strongest force. However, the silent pressure that builds up prior to the attack. As Kane's remaining men gather around him in Junction 2, the tension-filled underground darkness pulses. They had their backs to the wall. The Phantom Rider has lost any sense of professionalism. The twitchy awareness of those who are aware that they are being pursued takes its place. Red murmurs, hardly raising his voice above a whisper, he's playing with us. We believed we were the predators for all these years. Quit talking. Kane's order is not as authoritative as it usually is. Keep your positions. Now he must come to us. A low laugh reverberates through the passageways. Marcus, are you still thinking strategically? Down here in the dark, do you still think that holding ground means anything? Hunter leads Sheriff Hawkins and a group of federal officers through the basement of the hardware shop above ground. Junction 2 can be reached immediately from a maintenance shaft. Kane believes it has been blocked for years. However, Miguel kept it looking sealed and cleared it months ago. Hawkins marvels that he has been preparing for this moment for 5 years. Miguel's voice persists, coming from nowhere and everywhere in the tunnels. Marcus, are you aware of your actual error? Not by coming here. Not even in bringing your tactically trained Phantom Riders. You made a mistake by assuming that having the most firearms, the most troops, and the greatest control equates to power. A shadow is struck by a Phantom Rider's bullet, which lights up an empty tunnel. Kane growls, "Stop wasting ammunition. He's attempting to exhaust our rounds. Getting it right now?" Miguel's voice conveys the patience of a teacher. It's about time, but you haven't seen the wider picture yet. Iron, Red. Would you mind telling him? Inform him of your findings regarding Shadow Creek. The canon of Red falters. You were employed by the girls' families. But you didn't accept the position for that reason, did you? Go on, Miguel says. You're beginning to notice it. You accepted it since you were aware that Kane would eventually pursue you and deliver his entire business and network to your desired location. There is a hint of frenzy in Kane's laugh. Do you believe that now matters? I still have connections and resources that you cannot take away. Miguel corrects, had resources. The past tense. Federal officers have been moving on every place that Hunter mentioned while you were concentrating on me. We are now dismantling your network. Kane feels the knowledge as if it were a bodily blow. Hunter, that cunning. Miguel interrupts, loyal. Not to you, though. Marcus, loyalty must be earned. Via principle, via respect, and by demonstrating to others that power isn't about dominance. It's about accountability. Ethan abruptly takes Emily's arm as he listens to her from above. The maintenance shaft, Mom. Take a look. They can now discern shadows moving differently in the gloom of the basement. Federal agents are getting ready for the last act as they slide into position. Iron breaks first in the tunnels. You're done, boss. There is nothing left to return to, even if we manage to leave this place. Nothing. The pitch of Kane's voice increases. I established an empire. 15 years of labor. Of preparation. Of. Miguel ends his sprint in silence. Of hiding behind people and making use of them as scapegoats and shields. But tonight, that will stop. The radio of a phantom rider crackles with static, and then Hunter's voice is heard clearly. Every exit has been secured. There are federal agents present. It's finished. At last, Kane's facade breaks down entirely. As he did with the young motorcyclist above ground, he seizes Iron and uses him as a shield. Take a step back. You all. I have hostages left. However, Iron has changed since he mindlessly followed Kane for 15 years. Miguel has transformed as a result of his lessons learned in the dark. Kane is caught in the ribs when his elbow snaps back. The criminal stumbles. And everything changes at that instant. First to move, Red steps away from Kane and drops his weapon. And so do the Phantom Riders. They can finally determine when a situation is genuinely hopeless thanks to their training. No. Kane shoots frantically into the night. I refuse to lose to a disgraced police officer who pretended to be weak for 5 years. Marcus, that's where you're mistaken. He hears Miguel's voice right behind him. I wasn't acting helpless. These were the folks I was presenting. Red. Iron. Even your Phantom Riders. What true strength looks like. The fortitude to wait. To organize. To prioritize justice over retaliation. Though it's too late, Kane spins. He notices Miguel Valdez standing there in the beam of an unexpectedly turned-on flashlight. Steady hands. With purpose, the eyes are hard. Miguel murmurs, the girls at Shadow Creek. Their whereabouts should be known to their family. Want to make a confession? Kane lifts his weapon. All right. I took their lives. I killed them to demonstrate my ability. To demonstrate to everyone my invincibility. That nobody could. Miguel's hand moves with that unfathomable speed, interrupting his remarks. Kane fires his weapon. The accurate shot that disarmed him without causing red to flow from his wrist caused it to sting. Marcus, wrong lesson. Those who believe they are invincible. The people who fall the hardest are them. Ethan whispers to Emily above ground. Don't you think it's almost over? No, son. She responds. At last, realizing the extent of what Miguel has planned. It's only the beginning. It's going to get stormy. Marcus Kane also encounters his darkest nightmare in the tunnels beneath Thunder Basin. Justice itself, not a lawman or a gunfighter. Putting on the face of a man who has been training for this moment for 5 years. Marcus Kane lives in the glare of Miguel's flashlight beam. The once dominant criminal now retreated against the wall of the tunnel. His pricey outfit is filthy and damaged. The desperate man beneath his well-preserved exterior was exposed. The shooting was never the point, was it? Kane's voice trembles with anger and insight. All of those contests, all of those skill shows. They were merely a front. Miguel calmly responds after finally figuring things out. You took too long. Running from a non-existent threat for 15 years. Constructing fortifications against the incorrect type of assault. Local law enforcement and federal agents take their last positions around the maintenance shaft above ground. Hunter leads them quietly and effectively. His atonement is almost finished. Miguel goes on, his tone tightening, the girls. Marcus, tell me where they are. Their families are entitled to closure. There is no humor in Kane's laugh. Is that the purpose of this? Old history? They were insignificant. Merely trials and tests to see how far I could push things. To what extent could I exert control? Carefully positioned microphones pick up the confession as it reverberates through the tunnels. Ethan observes the federal officers' expressions harden as they listen to Kane incriminate himself in the hardware shop basement. Incorrect response. Miguel moves fluidly as he changes positions, maintaining Kane's visibility. Give it another go. Remember this time. You've lost your empire. We're rounding up your connections right now. The truth is the only thing you have left to negotiate. With his own weapon on the ground, Red advances. Boss, the ancient mine shaft. The one that you forced us to lock off after. Once you've completed them. Quit talking. Reaching for a concealed weapon, Kane's hand slides to his jacket. Before Kane's hand can close on the gun, Miguel's shot breaks through the tube. With surgical accuracy, the bullet destroys the weapon without causing skin damage. Miguel says gently, "That's 3 guns I took from you tonight. Do you want to go for 4? Kane loses all of his composure. Do you believe this will be the end of it? People like me will always exist. There should always be those who recognize the importance of authority. Marcus, no. People who share your opinions will always exist. Who think that instilling fear is the source of strength. From dominating other people. Experience weighs heavily in Miguel's voice. However, there will always be those who oppose them. Those who recognize that control isn't the true definition of power. It has to do with safety. As they start down the tunnels, the federal agents descend. They moved with precision and coordination. However, they are now practically superfluous. The rest of Kane's army has dropped their weapons. Realizing at last that they were a part of something far bigger than they had previously thought. Your hands are shaking, Kane says abruptly. It was flawless. Gave the impression that you were past your best. Not hurt. How much time did you spend practicing that? Miguel says it's been 5 years. Daily, keeping the illusion going. I'm waiting on you to locate me. To get your entire business exactly where I wanted it. Why? Kane insists. What's the point of all that trouble? I may have been pursued by you. Take me out whenever you want. Because Marcus, it wasn't just about you. Justice was at issue. True justice. Not merely retaliation. The truth should be shared with the families of those girls. Your entire empire should be destroyed for the sake of your victims. He points to Red, Iron, and the Phantom Riders as examples of these men. Deserved an opportunity to make a better decision. The sound of Ethan's voice echoes from above. Like I learned about storms from you, Mr. Valdez. It's sometimes necessary to let them accumulate before they shatter. Miguel calls back, his gaze fixed on Kane, smart boy. Is your mother protecting you? Emily replies, try to keep him away, in a proud and sympathetic tone. Then Kane pulls forth another secret weapon in his last move. A little derringer. Miguel, however, responds right away. With unfathomable accuracy, the bullet strikes the little rifle. causing it to spiral out into the night. Miguel carefully counts to 4. Marcus, that's the last one. Just in case, the one you kept for yourself. The one that even Mirror was unaware of. Kane and the scene are secured as federal agents rush in. Kane looks at Miguel with a mix of hatred and confusion as they read him his rights. He murmurs softly, all this time. I believed I was the chess master all these years. I believed I was the one with the forward-thinking idea. Miguel acknowledges, his hands steady as he holsters his handgun, you were playing chess. I was instructing. Educating these men on decision-making, consequences, and the distinction between purpose and power. Red reluctantly approaches Miguel as Kane is brought away. The shaft used for mining. We can point it out to them. Assist those families in finding closure. I understand, Miguel says. I offered you the option because of this. Punishment is only one aspect of justice. It also has to do with redemption. Ethan observes the federal agents and their detainees come above ground. Mom, he murmurs. All these years, Mr. Valdez wasn't just waiting, was he? He was constructing something. Finally realizing the full extent of Miguel Valdez's accomplishments, Emily draws her son close. Son, he was creating a moment. A time when punishment was not the only thing justice could accomplish. It might get better. As Miguel Valdez emerges from the tunnels, his hands calm and his mission accomplished, the morning sun peeks through the clouds over Thunder Basin. After 5 years of waiting, the storm had finally broken, and with it would come understanding as well as justice. Because sometimes overcoming your opponent isn't the greatest victory. It's in teaching others how to live better. Federal officials guide their inmates to waiting cars as dawn breaks over Thunder Basin, illuminating the sky with scarlet and gold hues. The residents of the town come out of their shelters and assemble in small groups to witness Marcus Kane, who was once so strong and commanding, being loaded into the back of a police vehicle. Miguel Valdez is drinking his morning coffee on the porch of the cafe, his hands firm. Now that justice has been done, the tremor that plagued them for 5 years is no longer necessary. Sheriff Hawkins joins him in saying, hard to believe. It all came down to one night after 5 years of preparation. Miguel does more than just plan, he also gently corrects and teaches. Every interaction, every moment, every morning in this diner was all part of presenting people in a new light. Ethan leaves Emily's side and rushes over to Miguel. Will the shaking in your hands return now? For your cover. Miguel kneels to look into the boy's eyes and grins. Covers are no longer necessary, son. Being true to who you are can sometimes be your greatest strength. As they are led past, Red and Iron, who are currently in detention but are receiving different treatment because of their collaboration, pause. With a regretful tone, Red replies, the mining shaft. We'll show them everything when we take them there today. Miguel answers, I'm sure you will. That's what separates being right from being strong. The fortitude to own up to mistakes and work toward improvement. Mirror observes from the window of a police cruiser, handcuffed and defeated. His expression is one of deep uncertainty rather than fury. Similar to a man who studied a language for years only to find that he never grasped its most fundamental ideas. Emily walks over and puts her hand on Ethan's shoulder. All of the morning spent listening to your quiet stories and watching you spill your coffee. Were you not instructing us all? Miguel nods, teaching, learning, getting ready. The strength of a town lies not in its walls or its weaponry. It lies in its citizens' capacity to unite in the face of evil. The evidence gathering is organized by Hunter Richards, who is now openly collaborating with the federal agents. His expression conveys the contentment of a guy who has at last discovered his actual calling. Ethan interrupts, what about the Iron Raiders, Mr. Valdez? Who ultimately provided assistance, the ones who gave up? Miguel responds that they will have to make decisions. The same as Hunter did. Punishment is only one aspect of justice. Giving people the opportunity to improve upon their previous state is the goal. Linda's diner is filled with the usual morning throng. However, they now view their typical corner booth in a different way. The man who waited there for years, patiently waiting for this moment, is finally understood. The families, Emily murmurs. The Shadow Creek ones. Their girl's fate will eventually be known to them. Miguel affirms that's what it was all about. Not merely apprehending Cain and destroying his kingdom. It was about finding answers, finding closure, and mending wounds that had been unhealed for 15 years. A federal agent with a satellite phone comes over. The first recovery team is at the mine shaft, sir. They located them. As Red said, all 3 girls. Miguel shuts his eyes for a moment. This is the culmination of 15 years of longing. Make sure a kind person delivers it to their families. They've had enough waiting. That is how much respect they deserve. As the morning progresses, new insights become apparent. There are more puzzle pieces coming together. Cain's concealed accounts are found by federal agents. His crooked official network. His well-preserved facade of authority. It was everything exposed to the light now. What do you think I still don't get? As he watches another police car drive away, Ethan asks. What gave you the idea that Cain might visit? Would everything be exactly as you desired? Miguel's smile conveys both contentment and melancholy. They can't let go because of folks like Cain. The idea that someone overcame them is unbearable. I was certain that he would ultimately learn about the elderly man in Thunder Basin who was trembling. Once a superb marksman, he now only spills his coffee. And he would come because of his pride. Emily concludes, realizing Dawning's point. Bring his entire operation to demonstrate his superiority. Miguel nods in pride. Men like Cain are predictable because of it. While everyone else is playing checkers, they believe they are playing chess. Never understanding that the most straightforward maneuvers can occasionally be the most successful. Over Thunder Basin the sun rises higher, illuminating a community that has been permanently altered by the events of the night. However, Miguel observes as his people starts to comprehend what they have seen. He also notices something else. The beginning of comprehension. Of fortitude. It's the strength that doesn't come from using force, but by hiding in the face of gloom. Now what? Ethan queries. The weight of what he has learned is evident in his youthful face. Right now. Miguel puts down his coffee cup, his hands firm. We now carry out our usual actions. We are alive. We gain knowledge. We support one another in being better than we were the day before. For that is the essence of true power. Not the power to destroy things, but the knowledge to strengthen them. Over Thunder Basin, evening falls. After the violent storm has gone, the sunset paints the sky in hues that appear more vibrant. Linda's diner's exterior. 3 vehicles arrive, carrying families that have been waiting for answers for 15 years. Miguel Valdez, in his normal booth, observes them. He held his coffee cup steadily. They're present. Standing next to him, Emily replies softly. The Shadow Creek families. Miguel gives a slow nod. The hardest thing is still to come. Sometimes the pain of discovering the truth is equal to that of ignorance. Ethan, seated at the counter, was observing. Notices a change in his mentor's expression. Not the 5 years' worth of measured patience. However, there is a sincere worry for those who are going to get the long-awaited closure. The first family comes in. An elderly couple. Their faces had the worn appearance of those who have endured too much suffering. When they spot Miguel, they halt. Their eyes began to light up with recognition. Valdez, Mr. The voice of the woman trembles. They informed us. You never stopped looking, they said. No, ma'am. Miguel responds tactfully. You keep some of your commitments. Regardless of how long it takes. Families start to arrive. And Linda starts to serve coffee in silence. The diner turns become a kind of haven. A location where 15 years of suffering start to come to an end. Outside, Hunter Richards assists federal authorities in organizing the mine shaft evidence. The stress of the endeavor is evident on his face. But also the resolve of a guy who is determined to put things right. Your sister. Joining him outside, Miguel says. We also discovered evidence of her. Kane maintained documentation. Ones that are specific. A federal agent offers Hunter a folder, and Hunter's hands shake. All this time. The men with whom I was riding were. He is unable to complete the phrase. You were unaware. Miguel doesn't sound judgmental. However, you decided to take action after discovering the truth. That's what counts. Iron and Red are still being held, but they are now completely cooperating. Give specifics that make Kane's complete business easier to understand. The weight of atonement is evident on their features. Heavy. However, it is less burdensome than the weight of complicity. Ethan observes the family inside as they process the information about what transpired with their loved ones. However, he also notices something else. How they appear to be able to handle the weight of the truth when Miguel is around. How they are allowed to grieve and recover because of his silent strength. Now I get it. Ethan addresses Emily. What made him wait so long? Why he made this idea? Why is that son? Because it was more than just apprehending criminals. The goal was to heal individuals. Each and every one. The households. The town. Some of the villains themselves, even. When Emily sees Miguel in a new way, she draws her son close. Not simply the silent father who taught her kid how to read clouds, and whose hands trembled. A force for justice, however. He realized that helping others bear their trials is where true strength is found. Sheriff Hawkins comes in with further files. Kane has been linked to 23 other incidents in 3 states by a federal task force. This exceeds everyone's expectations. Not as large as Miguel had thought. Refilling coffee mugs is correct, Linda says. He witnessed everything. Prepared for everything. Did you not? Mirror is escorted to a different vehicle for transportation, interrupting Miguel's remark. With fresh insight, the man turns away from his former objective. I researched every aspect of you. Mirror says. Each shot. Every method. Every action. But it wasn't until tonight that I realized what made you unique. What is that? Miguel asks softly. You didn't mention the shooting. The folks you were safeguarding were always the main focus. Mirror gives a headshake. Though I didn't understand your goal, I did learn all of your skills. As Thunder Basin is completely enveloped in darkness. Quiet chatter takes over the diner. As families reminisce about their departed loved ones, there will be tears and perhaps even laughter. It has been difficult to face the truth. It's liberating, though. Are you going to stay? Miguel is abruptly asked by Emily. Is it over now? Do you no longer require the cover? Miguel surveys the diner. At Ethan, who was admiring him. At the families as they work toward recovery. At a group of people who have come together to battle darkness and are stronger as a result. It was more than just a cover. Finally, he says. Somewhere throughout the journey. This location. These folks. They settled in. And house is something that should be safeguarded. Even after the storm has passed. The last of the sky's light disappears outside. However, Thunder Basin now emits a distinct type of light. The truth's brightness. Of justice being done. Of a community that is strengthened by uniting against evil. As Ethan watches it all, he understands that his mentor taught him more than how to interpret signs or comprehend storms. It dealt with the kind of strength that results from exercising your authority without trying to control others. But for protection. Not to shatter. But to recover. A week later, Thunder Basin is illuminated by dawn. A town's morning illumination was forever altered. At Linda's diner, Miguel Valdez is seated in his typical booth. But instead of seeming to be feeble, his coffee cup rests steadily in his palms. The TV in the diner is playing softly in the background. News headlines regarding the collapse of Marcus Cain's empire. About 3 states being the focus of federal investigations. Regarding the arrival of justice for numerous families who had given up on ever learning the truth. Emily and Ethan come in, making their daily stop before school. However, the way the child enters the booth opposite his tutor now reflects a new perspective. Ethan demonstrates his acquired observational abilities by stating that the clouds are different today. Greater. Thinner. The storm is actually over. Miguel concurs that some storms are. He no longer has to conceal the wisdom in his eyes. However, more are always on the horizon. We train others to read the signs because of this. Emily makes them each a cup of coffee. A new morning routine that reflects a deeper level of comprehension. Yesterday, the families departed. The final one. They appeared to be, not really joyful, but, at peace. Miguel ends in silence. That's the best we can hope for at times. Joy doesn't always come from the truth. But freedom is always the result. They can see Hunter Richards assisting Sheriff Hawkins in setting up a neighborhood security program via the glass. Former Iron Raiders who opted to work together are being offered opportunities to demonstrate that they can use their abilities for defense rather than coercion. Sheriff Hawkins joins them with his own coffee and announces that Red and Iron's trial is scheduled for next month. Their assistance is being considered by federal prosecutors. Dozens of unsolved cases will be resolved thanks to their evidence. Miguel nods, good. Avoiding repercussions is not the goal of redemption. It's about deciding to be better and tackling them. Without being asked, Linda brings breakfast. There is more on the dishes than just food. They bear the burden of belonging, understanding, and community. Mira wrote a letter. Ethan talks about slicing his pancakes with care. From a prison. Asked if you would come. Teach him what he was previously unaware of. Perhaps, Miguel says carefully. Man desires to acquire the proper knowledge. He is deserving of the opportunity. That was the main focus of these 5 years. Instructing those who are willing to learn the proper lessons. As she observes her son's interactions with Miguel, Emily sees more than just a teacher and pupil, she sees the exchange of knowledge that transcends observation and shooting skills. Are you going to instruct him? Softly, she asks. Actually instruct him? As you have been instructing us? Miguel's smile exudes kindness that is unmasked. Have been. The boy's intuition is sound. Recognizes the main things. Not the ability, but the motivation. The accountability that accompanies any form of authority. Thunder Basin goes about its morning business outside. However, the town suddenly feels different. A strength that stems from the understanding that its people united against darkness and triumphed, rather than from the memory of violence vanquished. Do you know what I discovered? Ethan remarks abruptly, his youthful face grave. About power and strength and all that? Miguel says, tell me, but his eyes give the impression that he already knows. Being the strongest, the quickest, or even the smartest isn't the point. It all depends on what you decide to do with your available strength. Just as you did. Instead of only apprehending Cain, you assisted in the healing of numerous individuals. Miguel's firm hand goes across the table and squeezes Ethan's shoulder. Son, that's the most crucial lesson of all. What you can do to other people is not what power is all about. What you can do for other people is what matters. The coffee cups are caught in the morning light that pours through the diner's windows. Passing deputies' badges. The optimistic faces of a community that has discovered its own power. Miguel Valdez's quivering hands, which he used for 5 years, are now steady. They contain more than simply coffee, though. They are trusted by a town that understands what justice really means. Ethan repeats, "The storm is over," but this time he means it. However, we continue to observe the clouds, don't we? Continue instructing others on what to search for. Miguel affirms, that's right, his voice containing the soft authority that no longer has to be concealed. For that is the essence of true power. Helping others learn to weather their own storms is just as important as surviving the storm yourself. As Emily observes her son learn this lesson, she realizes that Miguel Valdez accomplished more than simply bring justice to Thunder Basin. He demonstrated to the entire community, from the tiniest child to the oldest resident, that real power comes from choosing to protect and heal rather than from having the capacity to harm. A community that bears witness to a fundamental truth is illuminated as the morning sun rises higher above Thunder Basin. The greatest legends are sometimes created via the continuous, patient labor of educating others to find their own power rather than during violent incidents. And that legend endures in Linda's cafe, where coffee was once spilled every morning by an elderly man's shaky hands. Not in the tales of gunfights or altercations, but in the silent times of instruction, comprehension, and the repeated decision to use our limited resources to improve the world a bit from where we started. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you like this one. Simply click to view, and remember to subscribe. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.